Welcome. I'm Magnus, and I bring you horror stories to help you relax, or maybe to keep you up at night. Tell us where you're from. Are there spooky forests nearby? If you're a fan of scary stories, subscribe and drop a like. Get cozy, and let's begin. My name is Vance Holloway, 34 years old, and I live in Kansas City. I never imagined a weekend getaway would become the worst mistake of my life. My girlfriend Nora had suggested we try something different for our anniversary, something adventurous that would break our mundane routine. When her cousin Mitch mentioned an abandoned fire lookout tower deep in the Mark Twain National Forest, something about it instantly captivated me. It's completely off-grid, Mitch had said, showing us photos on his phone. Rangers haven't used it in decades, but the structure's still solid. Best view in Missouri. The drive from Kansas City took nearly 4 hours, with the last 40 minutes on unmarked forest roads that didn't appear on any GPS. My Jeep Cherokee handled the terrain well enough, though the scratching of branches against the windows made Nora wince. "Are you sure this is right?" she kept asking, studying the hand-drawn map Mitch had given us. I nodded, though truthfully, I'd been second-guessing our turns for the last several miles. We arrived late afternoon as sunlight filtered through the dense trees. The tower stood alone in a small clearing, a weathered wooden structure rising about 60 feet, topped with a small cabin. Something about its silhouette against the darkening sky sent a chill through me. The wooden steps zigzagged upward, and though they appeared intact, years of exposure had left them gray and splintered. "It's perfect," Nora whispered, but I caught the slight hesitation in her voice. We unloaded our gear quickly, wanting to get everything up before darkness fell completely. The climb was nerve-wracking. Each step creaked under our weight, and I couldn't help calculating how far we'd fall if anything gave way. The cabin at the top was surprisingly spacious, maybe 15 feet square, with windows on all sides offering panoramic views of endless forest. Previous visitors had left a small table and 2 chairs, along with a makeshift sleeping platform covered in dust. "Home sweet home," I said, trying to sound more enthusiastic than I felt. Something about the place felt wrong, not dangerous, necessarily, but unwelcoming, like we were intruders. Nora busied herself setting up our sleeping bags while I arranged our lanterns. As twilight faded, the forest below disappeared into absolute darkness. No distant lights, no sign of civilization, just us, suspended above a sea of black. That first night, neither of us slept well. The wind picked up around midnight, making the entire structure sway slightly. Every few minutes, the wood would crack or groan, sounds that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. Around 3 a.m., I jolted awake from a fitful sleep. "Did you hear that?" Nora whispered, her eyes wide in the dim light of our emergency lantern. I was about to ask what she meant when it came again, a metallic tapping from somewhere beneath us, rhythmic and deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. "Probably just the wind moving something," I said, though I didn't believe it. The tapping continued for nearly 20 minutes before stopping as suddenly as it had started. When dawn finally broke, I stepped onto the small observation deck and surveyed the surrounding forest. Morning mist hung between the trees, giving everything a dreamlike quality. That's when I noticed something odd, a thin column of smoke rising from somewhere in the forest, maybe half a mile away. I could have sworn there were no campsites or cabins in this area. Mitch had been very clear about how isolated this place was. As I pointed it out to Nora, I spotted something else that made my blood run cold. At the base of the tower, clearly visible in the morning light, our Jeep's tires had been slashed, all 4 flat against the ground. We were 60 feet up in an abandoned tower with no cell service, no nearby help, and no way out. "This is impossible," I muttered, staring down at our disabled vehicle through binoculars. Nora grabbed them from me, her hands trembling. "Who would do this? There's nobody out here." Her voice cracked with the beginning of panic. I put my arm around her shoulders, trying to project a calm I definitely didn't feel. The isolation that had seemed so appealing yesterday now felt like a trap closing around us. I decided to climb down and inspect the damage more closely. Each step on the weathered staircase seemed more precarious in daylight. Splinters jutted from the railings, and I noticed several bolts that had worked partially loose. At the bottom, the situation was even worse than it had appeared from above. The tires hadn't just been slashed, they'd been methodically destroyed, with multiple deep cuts in each. This wasn't random vandalism. Someone had deliberately stranded us. While examining the vehicle, I discovered something else. Our emergency radio was missing from the glove compartment. Everything else seemed untouched. Our extra food, camping supplies, even Nora's expensive camera. Just the radio. I fought down a wave of dread as I looked back up at the tower where Nora waited. The smoke I'd spotted earlier had disappeared completely, making me question whether I'd actually seen it. "We need to leave," I announced after climbing back up. "We can pack only essentials and hike out. According to the map, there's a ranger station about 12 miles east." Nora nodded, already gathering our water bottles and energy bars. That's when we heard it, a low, mournful whistling from somewhere in the forest. Not wind. Too deliberate. Too human. We froze, listening as it continued for nearly a minute before fading away. While packing, I noticed something we'd overlooked the night before. Scratched into one wall of the cabin were dozens of tally marks, and below them, a single sentence: "They come when you sleep." The carving looked old, the edges softened by time, but seeing it now sent ice through my veins. "Someone's idea of a joke," I said too quickly. Nora didn't look convinced. We'd just finished packing when a thunderous crack echoed through the forest. Birds erupted from distant trees, and a moment later came another sound, the unmistakable report of a rifle. "Hunters," Nora suggested, but we both knew hunting season was months away. I moved to the east-facing window and scanned the forest with my binoculars. Nothing but endless trees and undergrowth. Then movement caught my eye. Something large moving between distant trunks, too far away to identify clearly. Our plan to hike out suddenly seemed suicidal. 12 miles through dense forest, possibly being tracked by someone armed and hostile. But staying put with dwindling supplies wasn't an option either. As we debated our choices, I noticed something new, a faint metallic odor in the air, growing stronger by the minute. "Do you smell that?" Nora asked, her nose wrinkled in disgust. It reminded me of copper pennies and rotting meat. That's when we heard the first footstep on the stairs, slow, deliberate, making the old wood groan under significant weight. Someone was climbing up to us. Nora grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. We had nowhere to run. The steps continued, methodical and unhurried. Whatever was coming knew we had no escape. The footsteps stopped just below the trapdoor that led into our cabin. Neither of us moved, barely breathing as we stared at the floor hatch. Then came a sound that still haunts my nightmares, a low, wet breathing, like someone struggling through damaged lungs. Minutes passed with nothing but that disturbing respiration from below. Then, without warning, it retreated, footsteps descending the tower with the same deliberate pace. "We need to barricade that hatch," I whispered, breaking the paralyzing silence. We moved quickly, dragging the small table over the floor entrance and weighing it down with our backpacks. My mind raced through scenarios, each worse than the last. Whoever, or whatever, was out there had deliberately trapped us and was now toying with us. The question was why. As afternoon stretched into evening, strange sounds filled the forest, distant voices calling in what might have been words, but were just distorted enough to be incomprehensible. Occasionally, I caught what sounded like my name being called, but when I'd look at Nora for confirmation, she'd shake her head. "I heard something different," she'd say, her eyes wide with fear. Someone was playing a cruel psychological game, and it was working. The temperature dropped dramatically after sunset, our breath fogging in the cold air. The cabin had no heat source, and our sleeping bags would barely keep us from freezing. Worse, I began noticing a pattern in the forest noises. They were gradually circling closer, like predators tightening a noose. "They're coordinating," I muttered, more to myself than to Nora. She looked at me sharply. "They? How many do you think are out there?" Before I could answer, a new sound cut through the darkness, metal scraping against wood directly below us. It continued for several minutes, rhythmic and purposeful. When it stopped, I cautiously approached one window, shining my flashlight downward. What I saw turned my blood to ice. Someone had wedged metal spikes into the support beams at the base of the tower. Recent ones, gleaming in my light, alongside older, rusted pieces that had clearly been there for some time. That's when the realization hit me with sickening clarity. We weren't the first to be trapped here. This was some kind of ritual, a hunt that had been carried out before. The tally marks suddenly made horrible sense. I kept this revelation from Nora, who was already near her breaking point. Instead, I suggested we take shifts sleeping, maintaining constant vigilance. She agreed, though I could tell neither of us expected to find much rest. Around midnight, during my watch, I noticed a new development that sent panic coursing through me. Small, precise fires had been lit in a perfect circle around the tower, maybe 20 of them. By their light, I could make out dark figures moving between the trees. Too many to count, their movements oddly synchronized. They weren't trying to hide anymore. They wanted us to see them, to understand our situation. The night dragged on in a haze of terror and exhaustion. During Nora's watch, she shook me awake, her hand clamped over my mouth to keep me quiet. "Listen," she breathed against my ear. From below came new sounds, the creak of wood under strain, followed by a rhythmic swaying of the entire structure. They were testing the stability of the tower, finding its weakest points. By dawn, we were both delirious from lack of sleep and mounting dread. The circle of fires had been extinguished, and no figures were visible in the morning light. But the damage to the tower was unmistakable. Several support beams showed fresh axe marks, not enough to bring it down immediately, but a clear message. Our sanctuary could become our tomb at any moment. "We have to make a run for it," I said as morning light streamed through the windows. "They're trying to collapse the tower with us inside." Nora nodded, her face a mask of determination that couldn't quite hide her terror. We packed only the essentials: water, energy bars, my hunting knife, and a makeshift club I'd fashioned from a broken chair leg. The rest we'd have to leave behind. Our plan was simple but desperate: descend as quickly as possible and sprint east toward the ranger station. We'd stick to the densest parts of the forest where we might lose any pursuers. It wasn't much of a plan, but waiting for nightfall again seemed like certain death. "Ready?" I asked, my hand on the barricade we'd constructed. Nora took a deep breath and nodded. I moved the table and slowly lifted the hatch, half expecting to see someone waiting below. The stairway was empty. The descent was nerve-wracking. Every step creaked loudly, announcing our movement to anyone listening. About halfway down, Nora grabbed my shoulder, freezing in place. "Look," she whispered, pointing toward the treeline. Crude effigies hung from several branches, human-shaped figures made from sticks and twine, dozens of them swaying slightly in the morning breeze. They hadn't been there yesterday. We reached the ground and immediately spotted a path that had been cleared through the underbrush, an obvious invitation heading east, precisely the direction we needed to go. "It's a trap," Nora stated flatly. I nodded, but we had little choice. Going off-trail would slow us down significantly, and with the tower compromised, speed was our only advantage. We chose a middle path, using the cleared route, but staying just inside the treeline for some cover. We'd been moving for maybe 20 minutes when the first sign of pursuit came. A sharp whistle behind us, answered by another to our right. They were coordinating, trying to hurt us. I pulled Nora deeper into the forest, abandoning our original path. We pushed through dense undergrowth, branches clawing at our faces and arms. The sounds of pursuit grew louder, crashing footsteps, occasional shouts, that same eerie whistling. A clearing appeared ahead, and we burst through the treeline only to skid to a horrified stop. The ground before us was littered with personal belongings, torn backpacks, scattered clothing, a shattered phone. Most disturbing were the shoes, dozens of pairs arranged in neat rows, as if their owners had simply vanished while standing in formation. "Oh God," Nora choked, backing away. "How many people have they taken?" The whistling intensified, now coming from all directions. They'd driven us exactly where they wanted us. I grabbed Nora's hand, and we plunged back into the forest, no longer following any direction, just desperately trying to break free of the tightening circle. My lungs burned, and Nora was gasping beside me, but pure terror kept us moving long past the point of normal exhaustion. We stumbled into another clearing, this one occupied by a small, dilapidated cabin I hadn't noticed on our map. Without hesitation, we crashed through the door, slamming it behind us. The interior was sparse but showed signs of recent use: a kerosene lamp, some canned food, a stack of weathered maps. "Someone lives here," Nora whispered, her voice tight with fear. Before I could respond, a mechanical clicking sound came from outside, a sound I recognized with dawning horror as the cocking of multiple rifles. "Find something to block the door," I ordered, scanning the room for anything useful. That's when I noticed the walls, covered in photographs of people in the fire tower. Dozens of images, spanning what looked like decades, showing terrified faces peering out windows or making desperate runs through the forest. With sickening clarity, I realized we were looking at a trophy wall. Whoever these people were, they'd been doing this for generations, documenting their hunts with methodical precision. Nora's scream jerked me back to our immediate crisis. A hand had smashed through the single window, grasping blindly in her direction. I lunged forward, swinging my makeshift club with all my strength, connecting with a sickening crunch. The hand withdrew, accompanied by an inhuman howl of pain. "The back door," I shouted, pointing to a narrow exit I'd spotted. It was our only chance. As figures began to pound against the front door, we slipped out the back and into the fading daylight, running once more, though we both knew our strength was nearly spent. Night was falling rapidly as we stumbled through the forest, having lost all sense of direction in our panic. My legs felt like lead, each step a monumental effort. Nora wasn't faring any better. Her breath came in ragged gasps, and blood from countless scratches streaked her face. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit had momentarily faded, but I harbored no illusions that we'd lost them. They knew these woods intimately. They were simply regrouping. We reached the edge of a small ravine cut by a shallow stream, barely 3 feet across, but flowing quickly over smooth stones. "Water will mask our scent," I said, though I wasn't sure if our pursuers were tracking us by smell or some other means. We waded into the cold current, following it downstream. The water numbed my feet almost immediately, but the shock helped clear my mind. We needed more than just flight. We needed a strategy. After nearly half an hour in the water, we climbed out onto a rocky embankment. In the distance, faint lights glimmered through the trees, too orderly to be more hunting fires. "Could be the ranger station," I whispered, hope flaring briefly. Nora nodded, too exhausted for words. We moved toward the lights, trying to balance speed with stealth. The forest had grown unnaturally quiet. No insects, no night birds, nothing but the sound of our own labored breathing. The lights grew closer, resolving into the windows of a small cluster of buildings. Not the ranger station we'd been hoping for, but a small private hunting camp. 3 cabins arranged around a central fire pit, currently unlit. No vehicles visible, but smoke rose from one chimney. "People, help." We approached cautiously, years of horror movies making us wary despite our desperation. At the edge of the clearing, something made me grab Nora's arm, pulling her back into the shadows. The cabins looked wrong somehow, too perfect, too inviting. And then I saw it. Hanging from the porch of the largest cabin was a familiar-looking backpack. Mine, the one I'd left behind at the tower. This wasn't salvation. It was another trap, elaborately staged to lure us in. As if confirming my suspicions, the door of the main cabin swung open. A figure emerged, tall, dressed in what appeared to be park ranger gear, but something about the movements was profoundly wrong. Too stiff, too mechanical. "Hello," the figure called, voice oddly flat. "Is someone out there? We can help you." Nora's hand tightened around mine, her nails digging into my palm. We both recognized the voice. It was mimicking mine, using words I'd spoken earlier that day. We backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound. 20 feet into the forest, my foot came down on a dry branch. The crack might as well have been a gunshot in the silence. The figure's head snapped in our direction, followed by a sound no human throat could produce. A high, keening wail that was immediately answered by similar cries from the surrounding forest. They'd found us. We ran again, summoning strength from reserves I didn't know existed. Behind us, flashlight beams cut through the darkness, accompanied by that same rhythmic whistling. My mind flashed back to the photographs in the cabin, decades of victims. Would our terrified faces join that grisly collection? The thought gave me a final surge of desperate energy. The forest suddenly opened up before us, revealing a steep slope leading down to what looked like a paved road far below. Salvation, if we could reach it. We half ran, half slid down the incline, loose stones skittering away beneath our feet. The lights of occasional passing vehicles gleamed like beacons of hope. So close, just a few hundred more yards. That's when Nora screamed, a sound of pure anguish that stopped me in my tracks. I turned to see her on the ground, leg twisted at an impossible angle beneath her. She'd fallen into a hidden hole, and the sound of bones snapping had been audible even over our panicked flight. "Go," she gasped, face contorted with pain. "Get help. Come back for me." I shook my head, already trying to figure out how to carry her. The whistling was getting closer, flashlight beams sweeping the hillside above us. In my moment of indecision, they emerged from the tree line, at least a dozen figures silhouetted against the night sky. Their movements were wrong, jerky and uncoordinated, yet purposeful. Most disturbing was their silence now. No calls, no whistles, just the inexorable approach of predators certain of their prey. I made my choice, grabbing Nora and hoisting her onto my back despite her cries of pain. Each step down the slope was agony for both of us, but the road grew closer. I never saw what hit me, just a sudden impact that sent us both tumbling down the last section of hillside. When I regained consciousness, I was alone on the shoulder of the road, a passing trucker standing over me with concern. "You came out of nowhere, buddy," he was saying. "You need an ambulance?" I tried to speak, to tell him about Nora, about the tower, about everything, but my words came out as incoherent babble. They never found Nora, despite the search parties that combed the area for weeks afterward. The authorities discovered the tower and the abandoned cabin, but no photographs, no effigies, no evidence of anything I'd described. The official report listed Nora as missing, presumed dead from exposure or wildlife attack. They found no trace of our slashed tires. In fact, they found no vehicle at all. I live in Colorado now, as far from Missouri forest as I could reasonably get. Sometimes I wake up at night, certain I can hear that rhythmic whistling outside my window. The doctors call it PTSD, prescribe medications that help me sleep but don't stop the dreams. Dreams where I see Nora's face among the photographs on that cabin wall. Dreams where I realized too late that I didn't escape at all, that I was simply allowed to leave, to tell a story no one would believe. To serve as bait for the next curious visitors who hear about the abandoned lookout tower in Mark Twain National Forest where people go missing. People like you. My name is Arlo Mercer, 28 years old, and I live in St. Louis. Photography has always been my passion, capturing abandoned places, forgotten corners of the world that tell stories most people never hear. That's what drew me to the Taumstock Mountain Lookout Tower in the Missouri Ozarks. I'd read about it in an obscure urbex forum, a fire watchtower decommissioned in the 90s, supposedly still standing but completely off the maintained trail system. The poster mentioned strange light phenomena there, perfect for the night photography series I was working on. In retrospect, I should have questioned why the thread disappeared just hours after I'd saved the coordinates. My roommate Wesley decided to tag along, more for the camping experience than any interest in photography. "You always go to these creepy places alone," he'd said while helping load my Subaru. "One of these days you're not coming back." He'd meant it as a joke. I remember laughing. Wes brought along his girlfriend Danny and her brother Marcus, turning my solitary expedition into something of a double date with my girlfriend Kara. I hadn't wanted the extra company, but Kara insisted it would be fun, like those horror movies where the group of friends get picked off one by one, she'd joked. The irony of her words still makes my stomach turn. The drive was beautiful, autumn in the Ozarks, with forests painted in fiery oranges and deep reds. The conversation flowed easily, everyone excited about a weekend away from the city. Only Marcus seemed subdued, staring out the window with an intensity that bordered on unnatural. "You okay?" I'd asked during a gas stop. "Just feeling weird about this place," he'd answered. "Like I've been here before, but I know I haven't." I should have listened to that premonition. Should have turned around right then. We reached the trailhead late afternoon. The hike would take about 2 hours according to my notes, putting us at the tower around dusk. Perfect timing for the sunset shots I wanted. The trail started normally enough, well marked and relatively flat. After the first mile, though, we had to veer off onto an overgrown path barely visible among the underbrush. Danny complained about the thorns catching her clothes, while Kara kept unusually close to me, jumping at every snapping twig. Wesley maintained his usual cheerful patter, though I noticed he kept checking his phone despite the non-existent signal. The forest changed as we pushed deeper. The trees grew more gnarled, their trunks twisted in configurations that seemed to defy natural growth patterns. Moss hung in thick curtains, filtering the diminishing sunlight into an eerie green glow. "Anyone else notice there are no birds?" Marcus finally asked, breaking a silence that had gradually fallen over our group. He was right. The forest was unnaturally quiet, our footsteps the only sound for what felt like miles. "Maybe they know something we don't," Wes joked, but his laugh fell flat in the heavy air. We reached a small clearing where the vegetation abruptly stopped, as if conforming to some invisible boundary. Rising from the center was the lookout tower, a stark silhouette against the darkening sky, much taller than I'd expected. The metal frame had rusted to a deep crimson, almost the color of dried blood in the fading light. For stories of open stairs zigzagged up to a small observation cabin. Several steps were visibly missing, and the whole structure listed slightly to one side. "We're climbing that?" Kara asked, her voice tight with apprehension. "Maybe just me and Arlo," Wesley suggested, eyeing the questionable stability of the structure. "The rest of you can set up camp down here." Part of me wanted to insist on going up alone. These were my photographs, my project, but something about the tower's silhouette against the darkening sky made me reluctant to face it without company. We agreed that Wes and I would check the stability while the others set up our tents in the clearing. As I hoisted my camera bag higher on my shoulder, I noticed something odd, small objects hanging from the lower support beams. Stepping closer, my blood ran cold. They were teeth, dozens of them, tied with thin wire, swaying slightly though there wasn't any breeze. "Animal teeth," I declared too quickly, trying to convince myself as much as the others. "Probably from hunters." Wesley leaned in closer, his expression skeptical. "Hunters don't waste time hanging deer teeth from abandoned towers, Arlo." He reached out to touch one, then yanked his hand back with a hiss. A bead of blood formed on his fingertip. The wire was razor sharp. "What the hell kind of decoration is this?" The question hung in the air, unanswered but raising alarm bells we all chose to ignore. Setting up camp felt like a performance of normalcy, pitching tents, arranging sleeping bags, setting out cooking supplies, all while pointedly avoiding discussion of the teeth or the tower's increasing ominousness as darkness fell. Kara worked mechanically, her usual chatter conspicuously absent. Marcus kept wandering to the edge of the clearing, staring into the darkening forest as if expecting someone. Only Danny maintained any enthusiasm, organizing our supplies with determined efficiency. "Let's get a fire going," she suggested. "It's getting cold." The fire refused to catch properly, smoldering rather than blazing despite plenty of dry wood. The smoke had an acrid quality that made my eyes water and throat burn. "Something's wrong with this place," Kara whispered to me while the others were distracted. "I feel like we're being watched." I nodded, having felt the same sensation since entering the clearing. The rational part of my brain blamed it on the tower itself, the cabin windows like vacant eyes staring down at us. But deeper instincts screamed that the presence was alive, aware, and malevolent. As night fully descended, I decided we should postpone exploring the tower until morning. Better light for photos anyway. I reasoned, those safety concerns were my actual motivation. We huddled around our pathetic fire, sharing lukewarm food and forced conversation. Wesley tried maintaining his usual joviality, telling ghost stories that normally would have been amusingly campy, but now felt uncomfortably relevant. Halfway through his tale about abandoned fire towers and the rangers who died in them, Marcus suddenly stood up. "Do you hear that?" he interrupted, eyes wide. We fell silent, straining to hear whatever had alarmed him. At first, there was nothing but the slight crackle of our fire. Then it came, a faint metallic tapping from the tower. Rhythmic, deliberate. 3 quick taps, pause, 3 more. "Wind moving something loose," Wesley suggested, but there wasn't the slightest breeze. We listened, frozen, as the tapping continued for several minutes before stopping as abruptly as it had begun. No one mentioned investigating. No one needed to voice what we all felt. Something was very wrong with this place. Sleep came in restless fits, interrupted by strange sounds. Distant whispers that seemed to move around our campsite, the occasional snap of branches from the surrounding forest, and twice more, that methodical tapping from the tower. Around 3 a.m., I woke to find Kara sitting upright, staring fixedly at the entrance to our tent. Someone walked past, she whispered without looking at me. I saw their shadow moving against the tent wall. I peered out cautiously but saw nothing except our dying fire and the looming silhouette of the tower. Dawn brought no relief from the oppressive atmosphere. We emerged from our tents to find the clearing transformed. The morning mist hung unnaturally thick, limiting visibility to about 20 feet in any direction. The tower was partially obscured, its upper levels vanishing into the white haze. More disturbing were the new additions to our campsite. Small cairns of rocks had appeared overnight, arranged in a perfect circle around our tents. "Okay, this isn't funny," Wesley said, his voice tight as he looked accusingly at Marcus, the most likely culprit for a prank. But Marcus looked even more disturbed than the rest of us. "I didn't sleep last night," he said quietly. "I would have heard someone moving around out here." We all exchanged uneasy glances, the unspoken question hanging between us. If not one of us, then who? Or what? Danny suggested we leave, abandoning my photography plans altogether. The idea was tempting, but as I turned to my backpack, my heart sank. "The car keys are gone," I announced, emptying the front pocket where I always kept them. A frantic search of all our belongings revealed nothing. We were stranded. The realization that we were trapped hit everyone differently. Wesley immediately took charge, organizing a methodical search of the campsite and surrounding area for the missing keys. Kara sat on a fallen log, her face blank with shock. Danny paced nervously, suggesting increasingly unlikely explanations. Maybe an animal had taken them. Maybe they'd fallen out during the hike. Only Marcus remained strangely calm. "We should check the tower," he said, staring up at the structure now fully visible as morning mist burned away. "I bet they're up there." I didn't want to ask why he thought that, or who might have put them there. The tower had transformed in the daylight, less ominous perhaps, but more obviously decayed. Rust had eaten through critical supports, and several steps were completely missing from the zigzagging staircase. "It's not safe," I protested, but couldn't offer a better alternative. Our phones showed no signal, and the nearest ranger station was at least 15 miles away according to my map. Without the keys, we were effectively stranded unless we wanted to abandon all our gear for a very long hike out. "I'll go," Wesley volunteered, always the hero. Danny immediately objected, clutching his arm with surprising force. Their whispered argument carried the weight of old tensions, her fear of being left alone, his need to protect everyone. I ended the debate by shouldering my camera bag. "We'll both go," I said. "Two sets of eyes are better than one." The real reason was more selfish. If something had been luring me here all along, I wasn't about to let Wesley face it alone. The climb was even more treacherous than it appeared from below. The metal groaned under our weight, flakes of rust showering down with each step. Where stairs were missing, we had to stretch from one level to the next, balanced precariously on beams never designed as footholds. About halfway up, Wesley paused, breathing heavily. "Does this feel like a trap to you?" he asked quietly. The question didn't need an answer. We both knew it was. We reached the observation cabin after an eternity of careful climbing. The door hung askew on a single hinge, revealing a small room with windows on all sides. The floor was relatively intact, though littered with decades of debris. Old food wrappers, beer cans, the remnants of teenage parties from years past. But something else caught my attention immediately. Fresh marks gouged into the wooden wall panels. Names. Dozens of them, arranged in neat columns. The most recent entry made my blood freeze. Our names, all 5 of them, listed in the exact order we'd arrived at the clearing yesterday. "What the hell?" Wesley whispered, tracing the letters of his name with a trembling finger. I was more concerned with what occupied the center of the room. A small table that looked significantly newer than anything else in the cabin. On it sat a Polaroid camera and a neat stack of photographs. The top image showed our group setting up camp yesterday, taken from the vantage point of the tower cabin, exactly where the camera now sat. But that was impossible. The tower had been empty. We would have seen anyone up here. With growing horror, I flipped through the stack. Each photo showed one of us in a private moment from the previous day, Kara changing clothes in our tent, the thin fabric rendering it nearly transparent from the outside. Wesley taking a leak against a tree just beyond the clearing. Danny crying while Marcus comforted her, a moment I hadn't even been aware of. The final photo was the most disturbing, all 5 of us asleep in our tents, the image somehow taken from above through the tent material. Someone, or something, had been watching us all night. We need to get out of here. Now. Wesley's voice had lost all its usual confidence. I nodded, shoving the photos into my pocket as evidence. That's when we heard it. The trap door leading to the stairs below slammed shut with a metallic bang that reverberated through the entire structure. Wesley lunged for it, pulling at the rusted handle. It didn't budge. We were locked in, 60 feet above the ground, with no way down. Through the windows, I could see our campsite clearly. Kara and Danny stood close together while Marcus paced the perimeter of the clearing. They seemed unaware of our predicament, too far away to hear our shouts over the sudden wind that had picked up. The tower swayed slightly, metal joints creaking in protest. That's when I noticed movement at the edge of the forest, dark figures emerging from between the trees. Not approaching the camp directly, but spreading out to surround it. I counted 7, no, 8 shapes, moving with an odd, synchronized precision. "Wes," I hissed, pointing. He squinted, then his eyes widened in recognition. "Wake up," he screamed, knowing they couldn't possibly hear him. "Run." We watched in helpless horror as the figures closed in on our unsuspecting friends. Kara was the first to notice, pointing frantically toward the tree-line. The 3 of them huddled together, backing toward the tower, exactly where the intruders seemed to be hurting them. From our elevated prison, we had the perfect view of what happened next. The figures stopped their advance at some invisible boundary, forming a complete circle around our campsite. Then, with choreographed precision, they each raised an arm. The sound reached us a split second after I recognized the shapes in their hands, rifles. The clearing erupted in chaos as the first shots rang out. The gunfire was deafening even from our height, echoing off the metal structure of the tower. I watched in frozen horror as Marcus fell first, his body jerking violently before crumpling to the ground. Kara and Danny ran in panicked circles like trapped animals, screaming words I couldn't make out over the continuing shots. Wesley threw his entire weight against the hatch, bloodying his shoulder as he tried to force it open. I joined him, both of us straining against the immovable metal, desperate to reach our friends. A sickening realization washed over me. This is why we were brought here. Not as victims, but as witnesses, forced to watch helplessly as those we cared about were hunted. The figures moved with practiced efficiency, herding Kara and Danny away from each other, isolating them. I pressed against the window, heart hammering against my ribs, unable to look away yet unable to bear what I was seeing. Wesley had given up on the hatch and was now trying to break the window, using his boot to hammer against the reinforced glass. "God damn it," he screamed, tears streaming down his face as another shot rang out. Danny had almost reached the base of the tower when she fell, red blossoming across her back. She twisted as she dropped, her face turned upward. For one terrible moment, our eyes met across the impossible distance. Recognition, confusion, accusation, all flashed across her features before the light in them dimmed forever. Wesley's anguished howl would haunt me for the rest of my life. Kara was the only one still moving, having somehow found shelter behind a large fallen tree. The figures seemed in no hurry now, moving leisurely toward her hiding place. They were toying with her, I realized, prolonging the hunt for their own amusement. One of them looked up toward the tower and made a gesture I couldn't interpret, almost a salute, acknowledging our presence as spectators to their sport. "The camera," Wesley suddenly gasped, turning from the window. "Your camera has a flash. We can signal her." It was a desperate plan, but our only option. I yanked my DSLR from its bag, removing the lens to maximize the flash brightness. Standing at the window facing Kara's position, I triggered the flash repeatedly, hoping to catch her attention without alerting her hunters. 1 minute passed. 2. Then I saw her peek out from behind the log, her eyes finding the tower window. I gestured frantically, trying to convey a plan I was forming on the fly. The figures had spread out, flanking Kara's position. They weren't rushing, confident in their inevitable victory. That overconfidence was our only opportunity. I pointed to the dense undergrowth on the far side of the clearing, the opposite direction from where the hunters were concentrated. If she could make it into that thick brush, there was a chance she could lose them long enough to put serious distance between herself and this nightmare. Kara understood. I saw the moment of decision in her posture, the gathering of courage. She looked up at me one last time, nodded almost imperceptibly, then burst from her hiding place with unexpected speed. The figures reacted immediately, but their casual approach had left them out of position. Shots rang out, kicking up dirt around Kara's fleeing form, but she zigzagged unpredictably, making herself a difficult target. 20 yards to the tree line. 15. 10. For one beautiful moment, I allowed myself to hope. Then a new figure stepped out directly in her path, materializing from nowhere. Unlike the others, this one wore something that covered its face, a crude mask made from what looked like animal hide. It raised no weapon. It didn't need to. Kara skidded to a stop, trapped between this new threat and her pursuers. The masked figure reached out almost gently, touching her cheek. Kara collapsed instantly, as if her bones had suddenly dissolved. Wesley had gone completely silent beside me, his body rigid with shock. I couldn't tear my eyes away as the figures converged on Kara's motionless form. They didn't shoot her. Instead, they lifted her with surprising care, carrying her toward the edge of the clearing. The masked one turned toward the tower again, and though I couldn't see its face, I felt its gaze lock with mine. It raised a hand in what might have been a wave before following the others into the forest, taking Kara with them. As if choreographed with their departure, the hatch in the floor suddenly popped open with a rusty groan. The way down was now clear, but we both knew it was intentional. They were done with their show and were now inviting us to descend. "It's a trap," Wesley whispered, stating the obvious. But what choice did we have? Stay and starve in our metal cage, or take our chances with whatever awaited below? The descent was even more treacherous than the climb had been, our trembling limbs and tear-blurred vision making each step a potential disaster. Wesley went first, his movements mechanical, driven by the need to reach Danny's body, even knowing she was beyond help. I followed more slowly, expecting at any moment to feel a bullet tear through me. But no shots came. The forest had returned to that unnatural silence, broken only by the sound of our labored breathing and Wesley's occasional sob. We reached the clearing as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The bodies of Marcus and Danny lay where they had fallen, their blood already darkening on the rocky ground. Wesley collapsed beside Danny, gathering her limp form into his arms, his grief too profound for words. I stood uselessly nearby, my mind unable to process the enormity of what had happened. The campsite was otherwise undisturbed, our tents still standing, supplies untouched. As if to emphasize the cruel game being played, my car keys sat prominently on a flat rock near the fire pit, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. "We need to go," I finally said, placing a hand on Wesley's shaking shoulder. "It'll be dark soon. They might come back." He looked up at me with empty eyes. "We can't leave them here," he said flatly. "Like garbage. Like they didn't matter." I wanted to argue pragmatism. We had no shovels, no way to give them proper burials, but couldn't bring myself to say the words. Instead, I helped him wrap Danny's body in her sleeping bag, then did the same for Marcus. The work was grim and sobering, bringing home the reality that it seemed almost dreamlike in its horror. With the body secured in the back of my Subaru, we took one final look at the tower silhouetted against the setting sun. "What about Kara?" Wesley asked, his voice hollow. The question had no good answer. She wasn't here, might still be alive, might be suffering unimaginable torments. But venturing into those woods as darkness fell would be suicide. "We need to get help," I said, knowing how inadequate the words were. "Professional help. With guns." Wesley nodded numbly, and we climbed into the car with the weight of guilt and grief pressing down on us like physical things. The drive back to civilization passed in a fugue state, my hands operating the vehicle on autopilot while my mind cycled through the day's horrors on an endless loop. Wesley sat silent beside me, staring out the window with vacant eyes. What would we tell the authorities? Who would believe our story of masked hunters and ritualistic killings? We had the photos from the tower, but they showed only surveillance, not the attack itself. As the first lights of the nearest town appeared on the horizon, I realized with sickening clarity that we had left the most damning evidence behind: the bodies. The sheriff's office was a small brick building that might have been quaint under different circumstances. The deputy on duty looked up with mild interest as we stumbled in, his expression shifting to alarm as he took in our disheveled appearance and wild eyes. "Our friends," Wesley began, his voice cracking. They've been shot. Murdered. At the old fire tower on Town's Sock. The deputy's face registered confusion, then suspicion. Old fire tower? There hasn't been a tower there for 15 years. Collapsed during a storm in '09. My blood ran cold. That's impossible, I insisted. We were just there. We climbed it. I pulled out my phone, opening the photo gallery to show him proof. But every image from the trip was gone. Not deleted. The timestamps were there, but each thumbnail showed only static, as if corrupted beyond recovery. The Polaroids I'd taken from the tower were similarly ruined when I pulled them from my pocket. Black rectangles that showed nothing but my own fingerprints in the emulsion. Where's your car? The deputy asked, suspicion hardening his features. I pointed vaguely toward the parking lot. Outside. We have. I stopped, the words catching in my throat. We had the bodies. How could I explain that without becoming an immediate suspect? Wesley shot me a warning look, picking up the thread. We have camping gear covered in blood. Our friend's blood. You need to send people out there. Now. The deputy called for backup, and within minutes we were separated into different rooms for questioning. I told my story as calmly as possible, omitting the presence of the bodies in my car. I described the tower, the camp, the hunters, everything exactly as it had happened. The detective who interviewed me took meticulous notes, but couldn't hide his skepticism. Mr. Mercer, he finally said, we've had search parties in that area after hikers went missing last year. There is no tower standing there. It's been gone for years. Then what did we climb? I demanded, frustration breaking through my shock. What did we see? Our friends are dead or missing. Kara might still be alive out there. The detective's expression softened slightly. We'll send a team first thing in the morning. As for your car, we'll need to examine it. My heart sank. There was no way to explain why we had transported the bodies rather than reporting the crime immediately at the scene. Dawn found me still in the interview room, exhausted beyond words. Wesley was somewhere else in the building, presumably telling his version of events. A commotion in the hallway drew my attention. Raised voices, hurried footsteps. The detective reappeared, his face grave. We searched your vehicle, Mr. Mercer. I waited for the accusation, the arrest. Instead, he continued, there were no bodies. No blood. Just camping equipment. Exactly as you'd expect after a weekend trip. I stared at him in disbelief. That's not possible, I whispered. We wrapped them in sleeping bags. Put them in the back. Even saying it aloud made me sound deranged. The detective's eyes held a mixture of concern and suspicion. The search team radioed in from the site you described. There's no tower, Mr. Mercer. No signs of violence. No bodies. They found a campsite that looks recently used, but nothing else. My mind reeled, unable to process this new reality. Had I imagined everything? Was I having some kind of psychotic break? But Wesley had seen it too, experienced the same horrors. Where's Wesley? I demanded. Ask him. He'll tell you the same thing. The detective's face told me everything before he spoke. Mr. Clark isn't corroborating your story, Mr. Mercer. He claims you went camping alone, that he spent the weekend in St. Louis with his girlfriend Danielle. We've confirmed his alibi with multiple witnesses. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. Wesley was denying everything, pretending Danny was still alive. But why? To save himself from suspicion? Or was I truly losing my mind? Call Kara's parents, I suggested desperately. Ask if they've heard from her. Check Marcus's apartment. They're missing, even if you can't find bodies. The detective nodded, humoring me. We're doing that now. In the meantime, I think you should consider talking to someone. Professionally. 3 days later, I was released with no charges filed. No crime could be proven, after all. Kara and Marcus were officially listed as missing persons, but with no evidence of foul play. Wesley refused to see me, according to mutual friends, and had threatened a restraining order if I contacted him. Danny was indeed alive and well, posting on social media about weekend brunch as if nothing had happened. Only I remembered the truth, or what I believed was the truth, which doctors now gently suggested might be a shared delusional event triggered by stress and isolation. I returned to my apartment to find it largely as I'd left it, except for one detail that sent ice through my veins. Sitting on my kitchen table was my camera, which I was certain had been in my backpack at the tower. Next to it lay a single Polaroid photograph, perfectly clear unlike the corrupted images I'd shown the police. It showed Kara, very much alive but clearly terrified, sitting in what looked like a cave or underground room. On the back, written in unfamiliar handwriting, "Your turn next time." I've moved 3 times since then, changed my name, abandoned photography entirely. Nothing helps. Every few months, a new Polaroid arrives regardless of where I hide. Kara in various locations, always alive, always afraid, always with the same message on the back. I've stopped going to the police. Sometimes at night, I hear that rhythmic tapping on my window. 3 quick taps, pause, 3 more. I know what it means. They're waiting for me to return, to complete whatever ritual I unknowingly began. They're patient. They have Kara. Eventually, they know I'll come back to that impossible tower that both exists and doesn't exist. And the most terrifying part? I'm beginning to think they're right. I'm Elias Whitaker, 29 years old, and I live in St. Louis, Missouri. Last summer, I needed a break from the city grind, so I planned a solo camping trip to Mark Twain National Forest, about 3 hours south. I'd heard about an old, abandoned lookout tower deep in the woods. Creepy, sure, but perfect for a guy like me who loves a little adventure. I packed my Jeep with a tent, some food, and my guitar, figuring I'd spend a weekend strumming under the stars. My buddy Theo, 32, and his girlfriend Mara, 28, both from Springfield, begged to tag along. Theo's a loud, outdoorsy type, always cracking jokes, while Mara's quieter, super into photography. I wasn't thrilled about company, but they promised to keep it chill. The drive down was smooth, just us blasting music and laughing about old times. The forest was thicker than I expected, all dense pines and twisting trails. We parked the Jeep at a clearing near the trailhead to the lookout tower. It was late afternoon, and the sunlight barely cut through the canopy. I felt a weird chill, not from the air, but like something was watching us unpack. Theo was hauling gear, joking about bears, while Mara snapped photos of the trees. The tower was a mile hike in, a rusted metal skeleton looming over the forest. It looked wrong, like it didn't belong. The base was overgrown with vines, and the ladder to the top was missing rungs. I figured we'd camp at the clearing below it, safer that way. My gut told me to stay sharp, but I brushed it off as city nerves. Setting up camp was a mess. Theo kept dropping tent poles, blaming his sausage fingers, and I couldn't get the fire going. Mara wandered off to take more pictures, muttering about the vibes of the tower. By dusk, we had a shaky setup, 2 tents, a fire pit, and some chairs. The forest was dead quiet. No birds, no wind. I strummed my guitar to fill the silence, but every note felt heavy. Theo cracked open a beer, offering me one, but I stuck to water. Something about this place made me want to stay clear-headed. Mara came back, her face pale, saying she saw something move near the tower. "Probably a deer," I said, but my voice sounded hollow. Dinner was chilly heated over the fire. Theo burned his tongue and cursed loud enough to echo. Mara barely ate, staring at her camera like it held secrets. I tried to keep things light, telling a dumb story about a bar fight back in St. Louis, but the mood was off. The tower loomed in the distance, its silhouette black against the fading sky. I caught myself staring at it, like it was staring back. Theo suggested exploring it tomorrow, saying it'd be epic. Mara shook her head, saying it felt wrong to climb it. I didn't say anything, but I agreed with her. The idea of going up there made my skin crawl. As night fell, the temperature dropped fast. We huddled by the fire, passing around marshmallows. Theo was all talk, planning our hike for the next day, but I noticed he kept glancing into the woods. Mara clutched her camera like a lifeline. I tried to focus on the flames, but the darkness felt alive, pressing in on us. I've camped before, Ozarks, Rockies, but this was different. It wasn't just quiet, it was empty, like the forest was holding its breath. I told myself it was just the isolation messing with me. City guy, spooked by nature, right? But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The fire crackled, spitting sparks into the air. Mara whispered that she didn't want to sleep in her tent alone. Theo laughed it off, saying she was being dramatic, but I saw his hand shake as he sipped his beer. I offered to take first watch, figuring I wouldn't sleep anyway. They crawled into their tents, and I sat by the fire, poking it with a stick. The tower was barely visible now, just a shadow in the moonlight. I kept my flashlight close, scanning the trees every few minutes. Nothing moved, but the air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. I don't know when I started hearing it. A low hum, like a machine far off. It wasn't loud, but it was steady, coming from the direction of the tower. I froze, straining to listen. It could have been wind, maybe a distant car, but it didn't stop. My heart kicked up, and I gripped the flashlight tighter. I wanted to wake Theo, but what would I say? Hey, I hear a spooky hum. I sat there, eyes locked on the darkness, telling myself it was nothing. But the hum grew, just enough to make my stomach twist. I glanced at the Jeep, parked 50 feet away, and wondered if we should have just slept in there. Mara's tent unzipped, and she poked her head out, eyes wide. She asked if I heard it too. I nodded, not trusting my voice. She crawled out, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, and sat next to me. We didn't talk, just listened. The hum wasn't louder, but it felt closer, like it was inside my head. I suggested it might be a generator or something left in the tower. She shook her head, saying it didn't sound mechanical. We sat there, staring into the dark, waiting for it to stop. It didn't. Theo snored in his tent, oblivious, while Mara and I shared a look that said we were in over our heads. By midnight, the fire was dying, and I was too wired to sit still. I stood, stretching my legs, and shone the flashlight toward the tower. The beam barely reached it, but I swore I saw something shift at the base, just a flicker, gone before I could focus. Mara grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. She saw it too. We didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched the spot where it had been. The hum kept going, steady as a heartbeat. I told Mara to get back in her tent, but my voice cracked. She didn't budge. Whatever was out there, it wasn't a deer, and it was close. The hum didn't stop, and neither did the sick feeling in my gut. Mara and I sat by the dying fire, flashlights jittery in our hands. I kept telling myself it was nothing, maybe some old equipment in the tower, buzzing away. But the way Mara's eyes darted to the trees said she wasn't buying it either. Around 1 a.m., Theo finally stirred, stumbling out of his tent, bleary-eyed. "What's with the party?" he mumbled, then froze when he heard it. His usual grin vanished. "What the hell is that?" I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but my voice was tight. We all sat there, listening to that low, creepy drone, like a machine that wasn't quite alive. Theo, being Theo, decided we should check it out. "Probably just a busted radio or something," he said, grabbing his flashlight. Mara snapped that it was a bad idea, her voice sharp. I agreed with her. Wandering into the dark toward that noise felt like begging for trouble. But Theo was stubborn, already pulling on his boots. "You guys stay if you're scared," he teased, but his eyes flicked nervously to the tower. I couldn't let him go alone, not with that hum messing with my head. Mara cursed under her breath, but followed, clutching her camera like it'd protect her. We were idiots, but we moved toward the tower. The trail to the tower was narrow, roots snagging our feet. My flashlight beam danced over the ground, catching glints of dew on the grass. The hum got louder as we got closer, not deafening, but heavy, like it was pressing on my chest. Theo led the way, talking big about how he'd climbed worse towers as a kid, but his jokes fell flat. Mara kept stopping to adjust her camera, muttering about bad light. I wanted to yell at her to focus, but I was too busy scanning the trees. The forest felt wrong, like it was holding a grudge. I've hiked plenty, but this was different. Every step felt like a mistake. Halfway to the tower, Mara tripped, dropping her camera. It hit a rock with a sickening crack. She knelt, swearing, and picked it up, checking the lens. "It's fine," she said, but her hands shook. Theo told her to leave it, but she glared at him. "This is my work, okay?" I got it. Her photos were her thing, like my guitar. But right then, I wished she'd left the damn thing at camp. The hum was louder now, vibrating in my teeth. I glanced at the tower, its rusted frame barely visible through the trees. Something about it made me want to turn back, but Theo was already pushing forward, and I wasn't about to split up. We reached the base of the tower, and the hum was unmistakable, coming from somewhere inside. The structure was a wreck, peeling paint, broken ladder rungs, vines choking the metal. Theo shone his light up, squinting. "Maybe it's wiring," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. Mara pointed her flashlight at the ground, and we all froze. There were marks in the dirt, not footprints, but deep scratches, like something heavy had been dragged. My stomach dropped. Animals. I said, but it sounded dumb even to me. Mara shook her head, her face pale. The marks led into the tower's base, disappearing into the dark. Theo, trying to be the hero, stepped closer to the tower's entrance, a rusted door hanging off its hinges. I grabbed his arm. Don't. My voice was harsher than I meant, but that door gave me the creeps. He yanked free, saying we'd come this far. Mara backed me up, her voice low. This is horror movie stupid, Theo. He ignored us, shining his light inside. The hum pulsed, louder now like a heartbeat. I caught a whiff of something sour, like rotting fruit, coming from the doorway. My skin prickled. I've smelled bad things, trash in St. Louis alleys, but this was disturbing, wrong. We argued, voices low but heated. Theo wanted to go in, saying we'd regret chickening out. Mara was done, ready to head back to camp. I was torn. Part of me wanted answers, but the smarter part screamed to get out. I remembered a story from my dad about a hiker in the Ozarks who followed a weird noise and never came back. I shook it off, but it stuck with me. The hum shifted, almost like it was reacting to us. Mara noticed it too, her eyes wide. It's changing, she whispered. I nodded, my throat dry. Theo finally backed off, muttering about us being paranoid, but he looked spooked. We turned to head back, flashlights cutting through the dark. The trail seemed longer, like the forest was stretching itself. Mara kept glancing over her shoulder, and I did too. The hum followed us, fainter but still there, like it was tracking us. Theo was quiet now, his bravado gone. I tripped on a root, nearly dropping my flashlight, and cursed. My heart was hammering, and not just from the fall. I kept thinking about those scratches, how they didn't look random. It was like something had been dragged, or had dragged itself. The thought made my mouth go dry. Back at camp, the fire was out, just cold ashes. We didn't bother relighting it. Mara sat in her tent's entrance, camera in her lap, staring at the tower's silhouette. Theo paced, muttering about how we should have gone inside. I ignored him, checking the Jeep. The doors were locked, keys still in my pocket, but something felt off. I shone my light inside, and my breath caught. The back seat had a long, thin scratch across it, like a claw had raked the fabric. I hadn't noticed it before. I told myself it was from gear, maybe my guitar case, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I stood by the Jeep, staring at that claw mark on the seat, my flashlight shaking. It wasn't there when we drove in, I'd swear it. Mara noticed me frozen and came over, her face already pale. What's wrong? She whispered. I pointed, and her eyes widened. That's not. Elias, that's not normal. Theo, still pacing, snapped at us to quit freaking out, but when he saw the mark, his mouth shut. The hum from the tower was fainter now, but it still buzzed in my head, like a wasp I couldn't swat. Something was clearly wrong, horror movie wrong, and we weren't imagining it. My hands were sweaty, and I fumbled the keys, checking the locks again. We needed to talk, fast. Mara suggested we pack up and leave, right then. This place is bad, she said, her voice barely steady. I wanted to agree, but Theo cut in, saying it was just a scratch, probably from a branch or something. We're not running from a noise and a car mark, he growled. I got his point. Driving out in the dark on these rough roads wasn't smart, but staying felt dumber. I've had bad nights in St. Louis, like when my apartment got broken into, but this was different. This was disturbing, like the forest itself was against us. The air felt thick, and that sour smell from the tower lingered, even here. We huddled by the cold fire pit, debating. Mara kept her flashlight on the Jeep, like it was our lifeline. Theo argued we should wait till morning, saying we were just spooked. I wasn't so sure. Those scratches by the tower, the hum, now this mark, it was adding up to something scary. I suggested we sleep in the Jeep, lock the doors, and peel out at dawn. Mara nodded, but Theo rolled his eyes, calling me paranoid. Then we heard it. A snap, sharp and close, from the trees behind the tents. My heart slammed against my ribs. We swung our flashlights, beams cutting through the dark, but nothing was there. Yet, the snap came again, louder, like a branch breaking under weight. Mara grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. Theo whispered, "Deer," but it sounded like a prayer. I've heard deer in the woods before. Clumsy, quick steps. This was deliberate, heavy. The hum from the tower spiked, louder, like it was reacting. I told everyone to get to the Jeep. Now? Theo hesitated, shining his light toward the sound, but Mara was already moving, half running. I followed, keys in hand, my pulse racing. The forest felt alive, watching, and not in a good way. Something was out there, and it wasn't curious, it was hunting. We reached the jeep, and I fumbled the keys, dropping them in the dirt. Shit, I hissed, scrambling to grab them. Mara was yanking at the door, whispering, "Hurry, Elias." Theo stood a few feet back, flashlight sweeping the trees. "I don't see anything," he said, but his voice cracked. The hum was deafening now, vibrating in my bones. I got the keys, unlocked the doors, and we piled in, Mara in the front, Theo in the back. I locked us in, gripping the steering wheel, but I didn't start the engine. Not yet. The windows fogged from our breathing, and outside, the dark seemed to press against the glass. Inside the jeep, it was dead quiet except for our ragged breaths. Mara clutched her camera like it could save her. Theo kept his flashlight on, aimed at the windshield. I stared out, trying to see past the trees. Then we saw it. A shape, just beyond the beam's reach, low and hunched. It moved, slow and deliberate, circling the clearing. My stomach twisted. It wasn't a bear, wasn't a deer. It was wrong, like something that didn't belong in this world. The hum pulsed, matching the thing's steps. Mara whimpered, and I shushed her, not because I was calm, but because I was terrified it could hear us. The shape stopped, right at the edge of the clearing where the tower's shadow fell. I couldn't make out details, just a mass that seemed to soak up the light. Theo whispered, "What the fuck is that?" I didn't answer, couldn't. My hands were frozen on the wheel. The thing shifted, and I swore it turned toward us. The hum changed, sharper, like a warning. Mara's camera slipped from her lap, hitting the floor with a thud, and we all flinched. The shape didn't move, but I felt its attention, heavy and cold. It was like being stared at by something that hated you. I've never felt anything so disturbing. I reached for the ignition, ready to floor it, but Theo grabbed my arm. "Don't," he hissed. "What if it follows?" Mara snapped at him to shut up, her voice shaking. I hesitated, he halfway turned. The shape took a step closer, just enough to catch the edge of Theo's flashlight. It was tall, too tall, with limbs that didn't bend right. My mouth went dry. The hum was screaming now, filling the jeep, my head, everything. I wanted to drive, to scream, to do anything, but I was paralyzed. The thing moved again, slipping back into the dark, but it didn't feel gone. It felt closer. Mara started crying, quiet sobs that made my chest ache. Theo was muttering to himself, something about this being impossible. I kept my eyes on the spot where the thing had been, waiting for it to lunge. The hum didn't stop, didn't slow, and neither did the feeling that we were trapped. I glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that thing behind us, but it was just darkness. My mind raced. Should we drive, stay, fight? Every choice felt like a trap. The jeep was our only shot, but the road out was narrow, and that thing was fast. Something told me it wasn't done with us. My hand shook on the key, the jeep's engine still off. That thing was out there, circling, and the hum was a knife in my skull. Mara's sobs were quiet, but they cut through the silence. Theo's flashlight flickered, like it was giving up. "We gotta go," I whispered, barely hearing myself. Theo hissed that driving might draw it to us, but staying felt like suicide. The shape moved again, just a flicker in the dark, closer now. My heart was a jackhammer. I've been in tight spots, bar fights, car accidents, but this was horror on a new level. I turned the key, and the engine roared, headlights slicing through the night. The hum spiked, angry, and I floored it, tires spitting dirt. The trail was a nightmare, narrow and rutted, branches scraping the jeep like claws. Mara screamed to slow down, but I couldn't. Whatever was out there was fast. I glanced in the rear view, expecting to see that thing chasing us, but it was just black. Theo was yelling, something about the tower, but the hum drowned him out. It wasn't just in my head now. It was everywhere, shaking the windows. The headlights caught something, a flash of movement, long limbs darting across the path. I swerved, nearly hitting a tree, and Mara grabbed the dash, crying. The forest was a tunnel, closing in, and every second felt like a gamble with death. I kept driving, knuckles white, the jeep bouncing hard. Theo shouted that we missed a turn, but I didn't care. The main road was close, maybe a mile. The hum changed, sharper, like it was screaming. I remembered a story from St. Louis, a guy who swore he saw something inhuman in an alley. I'd laughed then. Not now. Something slammed the back of the Jeep, hard enough to jerk us forward. Mara screamed, and Theo swung his flashlight, but the back window showed nothing. Just darkness. My stomach twisted. That thing was on us, and it wasn't letting go. I pushed the gas harder, praying the tires held. The Jeep's shocks groaned as we hit another rut. Mara was hyperventilating, muttering about her camera like it mattered now. Theo yelled at her to shut up, his voice cracking. I wanted to scream too, but I focused on the road, what little I could see. The hum was unbearable, vibrating my teeth. Then the headlights caught it, standing in the path, tall, wrong, its limbs bent like a broken puppet. I froze, foot off the gas. It didn't move, just stared, its face, if it had one, hidden in shadow. Theo cursed, Mara sobbed, and I snapped out of it, swerving left into the brush to avoid it. The Jeep tilted, but we kept going. Branches snapped under the tires, and the path was gone. I was driving blind, aiming for where I thought the road was. The thing didn't chase, or maybe it was too fast to see. The hum pulsed, like it was inside me now. Theo kept looking back, saying he saw nothing, but his voice was shaky. Mara clutched her seatbelt, whispering, "We're not going to make it." I told her to breathe, but I wasn't sure myself. I've driven bad roads, Ozark back roads, icy St. Louis streets, but this was a death trap. Something scraped the roof, slow and deliberate, like nails on metal. My blood ran cold. The Jeep lurched as we hit a ditch, the engine sputtering. No, 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 I muttered, pumping the gas. It caught. Thank God, and we kept moving. The hum was fainter now, but the scratching on the roof didn't stop. Theo shone his light up, like he could see through the ceiling. Mara was silent, eyes wide, like she'd checked out. I saw a clearing ahead, maybe the main road. Hope flickered, but then the scratching turned to pounding, heavy and rhythmic. Whatever was up there was big. I floored it, the Jeep shaking, and the pounding stopped. But I knew it wasn't gone, just waiting. We burst onto the main road, gravel flying. The hum was barely audible, and the roof was quiet. I didn't slow down, not yet. Theo laughed, shaky, saying we made it, but Mara just stared out the window, blank. I kept driving, eyes flicking to the mirrors. The forest was still there, watching. I thought about that thing, how it moved, how it looked at us. It wasn't just scary, it was wrong, like it hated us for being here. The road stretched on, and I prayed we were far enough. But deep down, I felt it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Mara finally spoke, her voice small. "My camera's back there." I almost laughed. After all that, she cared about her camera? Theo snapped at her, saying we almost died, but I told him to ease up. We were alive, barely. The road was smoother now, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting to see that thing loping after us. The hum was gone, but the silence was worse, like the calm before a storm. I didn't know where we'd go. Gas station, motel, anywhere but here. The Jeep's engine hummed, steady, but I felt exposed, like we were still being watched. I glanced at Theo in the back. He was pale, clutching his flashlight like a kid with a teddy bear. Mara was curled up, staring at her hands. We'd escaped, maybe, but it didn't feel like winning. The road curved, and I saw headlights far off, another car, maybe help. But something told me we weren't safe yet. The forest was behind us, but that thing, whatever it was, didn't feel bound to the trees. It was like it knew us now, like it had our scent. I kept driving, faster than I should have, because stopping wasn't an option. The road stretched on, and those headlights never got closer. I kept driving, the Jeep's engine the only sound now. Theo was quiet, his bravado gone. Mara hadn't moved, still staring at her hands like they held answers. I wanted to say something, to make it okay, but my throat was tight. We'd gotten away from that thing, but the horror clung to us, heavy and cold. I thought about pulling over, catching my breath, but every time I slowed, I felt it, that disturbing weight, like eyes on my back. I've driven long nights before, but this was different. It was like the dark was alive, following us. I gripped the wheel and kept going, aiming for the nearest town, Poplar Bluff, maybe 30 miles out. We hit a gas station just before dawn, its neon sign flickering like a bad omen. I parked under the brightest light, but it didn't help. The air felt wrong, too still. Theo got out first, saying he needed air, but he stayed close to the Jeep. Mara followed, silent, her eyes red from crying. I checked the tank, half full, enough to keep going. Inside, the clerk was an older guy, half asleep, barely glancing at us. I bought coffee, but it tasted like ash. Theo grabbed snacks, joking weakly about survival food, but his hands shook. Mara stood by the door, staring out, like she expected that thing to stroll up. The clerk asked if we were okay, and I lied, saying we just got lost camping. Back in the Jeep, we sat there, engine off. Theo suggested crashing at a motel, but Mara shook her head. "I want to go home," she said, her voice flat. I got it. Home felt safe, even if it was hours away. But something nagged at me, a mistake I couldn't name. I kept thinking about Mara's camera, left at the camp. It was stupid, but it felt like a loose end, like we'd left part of ourselves behind. I shook it off and started the engine. The sun was creeping up, painting the sky red. Red sky at morning, my dad used to say. Sailors take warning. I wished I'd listened to my gut and never come here. We drove toward Springfield, Mara's place, since it was closer than St. Louis. The road was quiet, just us and the occasional truck. Theo tried the radio, but static drowned everything, like the hum was still out there, hiding. Mara finally spoke, saying she'd seen something on her camera before it fell. "A shape," she whispered, "in the tower's window." My stomach dropped. She hadn't mentioned it before, and now it felt like a secret she'd held too long. Theo snapped that she was imagining things, but I saw his eyes dart to the windows. I wanted to ask more, but the way she hugged herself stopped me. Whatever she saw, it was real to her. An hour in, the Jeep started acting up, a low whine from the engine, then a jolt. I cursed, pulling over. The hood was hot, and when I popped it, I saw nothing obvious, just wires and grease. Theo hovered, useless, while Mara stayed in the car, staring out. I'm no mechanic, but I fixed flats, changed oil. This was different. The whine reminded me of that hum, and I hated it. A trucker stopped, offering help, but his eyes lingered on us, like he knew something. He said the nearest garage was 10 miles back. I thanked him, but my skin crawled. We were stranded, and that thing felt closer than ever. Back in the Jeep, I tried the engine again. It sputtered but started, barely. Theo was ranting about bad luck, but Mara was quiet, too quiet. "We shouldn't have left it," she said suddenly. I asked what, and she looked at me, eyes wide. "The camera. It's still there, with whatever I saw." I told her it didn't matter, but her words stuck. It was a mistake, leaving it, like we'd given that thing a piece of us. I drove on, the engine whining, my head pounding. The forest was long behind us, but the horror wasn't. It was in us now, in the way we couldn't look at each other. The Jeep died 5 miles from the garage, engine coughing like it was choking. We coasted to the shoulder, dead. Theo kicked the tire, cursing, while Mara sat on the hood, blank-faced. I called a tow, but the signal was weak, cutting out. The sun was high now, but it didn't feel safe. I kept scanning the road, the fields, expecting that hunched shape to slink out. Theo noticed, telling me to chill, but his voice was thin. Mara stood, walking a few steps away, staring at the horizon. "It's not done," she said, so soft I almost missed it. I asked what she meant, but she just shook her head, like she was already gone. The tow truck took forever, and when it arrived, the driver was chatty, asking where we'd been. I said camping, keeping it vague, but Mara blurted, "Mark Twain Forest, by the tower." The driver's smile faded, and he muttered something about that place being off. My heart sank. He knew something, but he didn't elaborate, just hooked up the Jeep. We crammed into his cab, silent. I kept thinking about Mara's camera, her words, that shape. It was a mistake, not just leaving it, but coming here at all. The driver dropped us at the garage, and we waited, but the air was heavy, like we'd brought the forest with us. The mechanic said the Jeep's fuel line was shredded, like something clotted. My blood ran cold. Theo laughed it off, saying it was just wear, but the mechanic shook his head. "Not like this." Mara didn't react, just sat in the waiting room, staring at nothing. I paid for the fix, but my hands shook. We drove to Springfield, dropped Mara off. She didn't say goodbye, just walked inside, like a ghost. Theo and I headed to St. Louis, silent. That night, I got a text from Mara's phone, just one word, "Camera." I called, but it went to voicemail. The next day, her roommate said she'd gone back to the forest alone. They found her car by the tower, empty, her camera gone. We'd escaped, but she hadn't. And I knew, deep down, It was my fault for not stopping her. I'm Nora Callahan, 34 years old, and I live in Kansas City, Missouri. Last fall, I needed to unplug from my desk job's endless emails, so I planned a camping trip to Mark Twain National Forest, a few hours southeast. I'd read about an old lookout tower out there, abandoned since the 70s, and it sounded like the perfect spot to clear my head. I loaded my Subaru with gear, tent, stove, a sketchpad for doodling, and hit the road. My old college friend, Gideon Platt, 36, and his cousin, Livia Morse, 29, both from Columbia, insisted on joining. Gideon's a history buff, always spouting random facts, while Livia's a fitness freak, forever jogging. I wanted solitude, but their excitement was infectious, so I said yes. The drive was all golden leaves and crisp air, with Gideon blabbing about the tower's past, something about forest fires and weird accidents. Livia rolled her eyes, blasting her workout playlist. We reached the forest by noon, parking at a gravel lot near the trail to the tower. The trees were dense, swallowing the sunlight, and the air had a bite. I felt a prickle on my neck, like the woods were sizing us up. Gideon hauled our bags, joking about roughing it, while Livia did stretches by the car. The tower was a half-mile hike, a rusted relic poking above the pines. It looked lonely, almost sad, but my gut twisted when I saw it. Hiking in, the trail was muddy, slick from recent rain. Gideon kept stopping to examine rocks, claiming they might be artifacts. Livia sprinted ahead, calling us slowpokes. I tried to enjoy it, sketching a twisted tree in my pad, but the forest was too quiet. No birds, just our footsteps. The tower loomed closer, its metal frame pitted and gray, like a skeleton left to rot. The platform at the top was intact, but the ladder was a mess, half the rungs gone. I decided we'd camp in the clearing below. Climbing that thing looked like a broken neck waiting to happen. Still, something about it drew my eye, like it was watching. Setting up camp took forever. Gideon tangled the tent ropes, cursing his city hands, and I burned my finger lighting the stove. Livia, annoyingly perfect, had her tent up in 10 minutes. By dusk, we had a decent setup, 2 tents, a fire pit, and a cooler of burgers. The silence was heavier now, pressing down. I sketched the tower to shake the unease, but my lines came out jagged. Gideon started a fire, his face lit orange, and told us about a ranger who vanished near here decades ago. Livia scoffed, saying he was full of it, but I noticed her glance at the trees. The story stuck with me, creepy and unwanted. We cooked burgers, the sizzle filling the quiet. Gideon burned his, blaming the cursed forest, and I laughed, but it felt forced. Livia ate fast, then started doing push-ups, like she could outrun the weird vibe. I tried to sketch again, but my pencil kept slipping, like my hands knew something I didn't. The tower's silhouette was sharp against the darkening sky, and I swore it looked taller, like it had grown. I shook it off, tired eyes, right? But the air felt thick, like before a storm. I've camped in the Ozarks, slept under stars, but this place was different. It was horror movie quiet, and I didn't like it. As night settled, the fire was our only light. Gideon pulled out a flask, offering whiskey, but I passed. Something told me to stay sharp. Livia took a swig, then challenged us to a ghost story contest. She went first, spinning a tale about a haunted gym, but it was lame, and we teased her. Gideon's story was better, about a tower like this one, where workers heard voices from the ground below. My skin prickled. I told a quick one about a lost hiker, but my heart wasn't in it. The forest seemed to listen, soaking up our words. I kept glancing at the tower, its shape barely visible now, but heavy, like it was waiting. Livia suggested a night hike to burn off the spooky, but Gideon and I shot it down. No way was I wandering out there. We stayed by the fire, but the mood was off. Gideon kept checking his phone, even though there was no signal. Livia paced, her energy jittery, like she felt it too, that disturbing weight in the air. I've had bad nights in Kansas City, like when my car got towed in a sketchy lot, but this was worse. It wasn't just nerves, it was like the forest was holding its breath. I poked the fire, sparks popping, and told myself it was just a weird night. But I knew better. Around 10 p.m., Gideon froze, staring past the fire. "You see that?" he whispered. I followed his gaze to the tower. Something flickered at the base, like a light, but it was gone fast. Livia squinted, saying it was probably a reflection. I wasn't so sure. My flashlight was in my tent, but I didn't want to move. The air got colder, and the fire dimmed, like something was sucking its heat. Gideon stood, slow, like he was drawn to it. I grabbed his arm, hissing, "Don't." He shook me off, saying he just wanted a look. Livia backed him up, curious, but I felt sick. That flicker wasn't right. We sat there, eyes locked on the tower, waiting for it to happen again. The forest was dead still, but I felt watched, like eyes were boring into me from the dark. Gideon whispered that it might be campers, but his voice was thin. Livia gripped her water bottle, knuckles white. I wanted to pack up and leave, but the Subaru was a half-mile back, and hiking now felt like walking into a trap. The flicker came again, brighter, at the tower's base, and this time, it didn't fade. It pulsed, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. My mouth went dry. Whatever it wasn't a camper. And it was calling us. That pulsing light at the tower's base kept going, like a sick heartbeat, and I couldn't look away. Gideon was half standing, muttering about checking it out, while Livia gripped her water bottle, eyes wide. I hissed at him to sit down. Wandering over there felt like a horror movie's worst decision. My heart was thumping, and the air felt colder, like the forest was leaning in. Gideon argued it could be a lost hiker's signal, but Livia snapped, "Hikers don't glow like that." She was right. I've seen campfires, flashlights, but this was different, disturbing, unnatural. We stayed put, but the light didn't stop, and neither did the feeling we were being watched. Livia suggested packing up and hiking back to the Subaru, but it was pitch black, and the trail was a muddy mess. I've tripped on city sidewalks at night. This would be worse. Gideon vetoed it, saying we'd wait till dawn, but his voice was shaky, not his usual know-it-all tone. I glanced at my sketch pad, useless now, and wished I'd brought a knife or something. The fire was dying, and I tossed on more wood, sparks flaring. The light pulsed brighter, and I swore it moved, just a fraction, toward us. My stomach nodded. We needed a plan, but all I could think was how far we were from help. Gideon, trying to take charge, grabbed his flashlight and aimed it at the tower. The beam caught the rusted metal, but the light at the base seemed to swallow it, like a black hole. "That's not normal," he whispered, and for once, I agreed with his nerdy instincts. Livia stood, pacing, saying we should at least move the tents closer to the Subaru. It wasn't a bad idea, but dragging gear in the dark felt risky. I remembered a Kansas City news story about a hiker lost in these woods, found days later, babbling about lights. I shook it off, but it clung to me. The pulsing was louder now, almost a hum, vibrating in my chest. We argued, voices low but sharp. Gideon wanted to investigate, saying it might be historical, whatever that meant. Livia called him reckless, pushing for retreat. I was torn, curiosity tugged, but fear screamed louder. The hum grew, not deafening, but heavy, like it was alive. I suggested we stay in one tent, keep watch, and bolt at first light. Livia nodded, but Gideon scoffed, saying we were overreacting. Then the fire sputtered, flames dropping low, like something sucked the air out. My skin crawled. I've been spooked before, dark alleys, bad dates, but this was horror level wrong. Livia grabbed her backpack, ready to move, when Gideon tripped over a tent peg, dropping his flashlight. It rolled, beam spinning, and caught something in the trees, a shape, low and still, just beyond the clearing. My breath caught. It wasn't a person, wasn't an animal. It was just there, watching. Gideon scrambled up, cursing, and the shape was gone when he aimed the light again. Livia froze, her face pale. "You saw that, right?" she whispered. I nodded, mouth dry. The hum sharpened, like it knew we'd seen it. Whatever was out there wasn't curious, it was waiting. We crammed into my tent, zipping it tight, like that'd help. Gideon clutched his flashlight, Livia her water bottle, and I held my sketch pad, useless but familiar. The hum was steady now, pulsing with the light. We whispered plans, stick together, run at dawn, don't look back. But every creak outside made us flinch. I thought about my office in Kansas City, how boring it seemed now. Safe. The tent felt flimsy, like tissue paper against whatever was out there. Livia kept checking her phone, no signal, muttering about bad choices. Gideon was quiet, his history facts useless. The hum felt closer, like it was inside the tent. I peeked through the tent's mesh window, stupid but desperate. The tower was a black outline, the light at its base brighter, almost blinding. It pulsed faster, and I swore I saw movement. Multiple shapes, low and quick, circling the clearing. My heart slammed against my ribs. I whispered to the others, and Gideon looked, his face draining. Livia refused, shaking her head, saying she didn't want to know. The hum was a drone now, rattling my teeth. I've heard creepy sounds, sirens, storms, but this was disturbing, like it was speaking. We needed to move, but fear glued us in place. Livia broke the silence, saying we should have left hours ago. Her voice was sharp, blaming Gideon for dragging us here. He snapped back, saying she was the one who wanted adventure. I told them to shut it, fighting wouldn't help. The hum shifted, almost mocking, and the light flared, casting shadows through the tent. One shadow was wrong. Tall, thin, not human. It lingered, then vanished. My hands shook. I thought about a co-worker who quit to find herself in the woods. She came back rattled, never explaining why. I got it now. Something was out there, and it wasn't letting us go easy. We decided to make a run for the Subaru at first light, no stopping. Gideon suggested grabbing the cooler, but Livia and I shot that down. Food wasn't worth it. The hum was relentless, and the light pulsed like it was counting down. I checked my watch, 2 a.m. hours till dawn. We took turns watching the window, but every shadow looked like that thing. Livia's breathing was ragged, Gideon's eyes wild. I clutched my keys, the Subaru, our only shot. The forest was silent except for the hum, but it felt alive, plotting. I knew, deep down, we'd made a mistake coming here, and it wasn't done with us. The hum was a blade in my skull, and that pulsing light at the tower's base was brighter, like it was daring us to move. We were crammed in my tent, Gideon's flashlight shaking, Livia's breathing jagged. I peeked out again, stupidly, and saw those shapes, 3, maybe 4, circling the clearing, low and fast. They weren't animals, weren't people. My heart slammed so hard I thought I'd puke. This was horror, real and raw, not some ghost story. I whispered to stay still, but Gideon was muttering about documenting it, like we were in a damn museum. Livia hissed at him to shut up, her voice all fear. The shape stopped, and the hum spiked, like they knew we were talking. I clutched the Subaru keys, my palms sweaty. The car was our shot, but it was a half-mile away, and those things were between us and the trail. Livia whispered we should have run earlier, and I felt the guilt. She was right. I've been in bad spots in Kansas City, like dodging a mugger once, but this was different. This was disturbing, like the forest itself was alive and pissed. The light flared, casting shadows inside the tent, and one was wrong. Tall, spindly, with arms too long. It lingered, then moved, like it was sniffing us out. Gideon's flashlight died, and he cursed, smacking it. The darkness felt heavier, like it was swallowing us. Livia grabbed my arm, nails digging in. "They're closer," she whispered. I didn't look, I could feel it. The hum was louder, vibrating my bones, and the air stank, like wet rot and metal. Gideon, trying to be brave, unzipped the tent a crack, saying he'd check. I yanked him back, hissing, "Are you insane?" He glared, but stayed put. The shapes moved again, and I heard it, a low, scraping sound, like claws on dirt. My stomach dropped. I remembered a co-worker's story about a camping trip where they heard scratches all night. They laughed it off. I wasn't laughing. This was terror, and it was real. We sat frozen, barely breathing. The scraping got closer, circling the tent. Livia was shaking, muttering about her mom, like a prayer. Gideon was silent, his history nerd brain finally out of facts. I gripped the keys so hard they bit my palm. The hum changed, almost words, but not quite, like a language I didn't want to understand. Then the tent shook, just once, like something brushed it. Livia stifled a scream, and I clamped a hand over her mouth, my own heart racing. The light pulsed faster, and I swore I saw a shape right outside, its shadow stretching across the tent's wall, all wrong angles and hunger. I whispered we had to move, now. The Subaru was our only chance, but we'd have to run past those things. Gideon nodded, pale, and Livia whimpered but agreed. We grabbed what we could, my sketch pad, her water bottle, his dead flashlight. Useless, but it felt like control. The scraping stopped, but the hum didn't, and the light was blinding, like it was inside my head. I unzipped the tent, slow, praying the shapes were gone. They weren't. One stood at the clearing's edge, tall and thin, its head tilted like it was listening. My mouth went dry. It wasn't human, and it wasn't alone. The thing moved, fast, darting toward the tower. The others followed, their shapes blurring in the light. I didn't wait. I shoved Gideon and Livia out, hissing, "Run!" We bolted for the trail, my flashlight bouncing, catching glimpses of trees and mud. The hum screamed, like it was angry, and the light pulsed behind us, throwing our shadows long and twisted. I heard scraping again, closer, like those things were on our heels. Livia stumbled, and I grabbed her arm, yanking her up. Gideon was ahead, panting, "No jokes now. I've run from trouble before, but this was life or death, and the forest was against us." We hit the trail, slick and treacherous. My lungs burned, and Livia was sobbing, but we kept going. The hum was everywhere, and the light didn't fade. It followed, like a spotlight. I glanced back, stupidly, and saw one of those things loping after us, its limbs bending wrong, like a spider playing human. My scream stuck in my throat. Gideon yelled to keep moving, but his voice was raw. The Subaru was close, maybe a quarter mile, but it felt like forever. Something brushed my back, cold and sharp, and I ran faster, terror flooding me. Those things were fast, and they weren't stopping. The trail curved, and I saw the gravel lot, the Subaru glinting under moonlight. Hope flared, but the hum was deafening, and the light was right behind us, burning my eyes. Livia tripped again, her water bottle flying, and Gideon stopped to help her. I screamed at them to move, but the thing was there, right behind them, its shape towering, all jagged edges. It didn't lunge, just stood, watching, like it was toying with us. My hands shook as I fumbled the keys, the car so close but so far. The hum felt like it was laughing, and I knew we weren't out of this yet. I reached the Subaru, unlocking it with a beep that felt too loud. Livia and Gideon caught up, diving in as I started the engine. The thing didn't move, just stared, its shape seared into my brain. The hum pulsed, matching my heartbeat, and the light flared one last time, blinding. I slammed the gas, tires spinning on gravel, and we peeled out, the lot shrinking behind us. But the scraping followed, faint but there, like claws on the roof. My hands were ice, and Livia was crying, saying it wasn't over. She was right. Something was still with us, and it wasn't done. The Subaru's tires screamed on the gravel, my foot heavy on the gas. The hum was a roar in my ears, and that thing's shape, tall, wrong, burned in my mind. Livia was sobbing in the back, Gideon gripping the door, his face ghost white. The trail was a blur, branches clawing the car like fingers. I kept checking the rear view, expecting those things to lunge from the dark. The light from the tower faded, but the scraping on the roof didn't stop, slow and deliberate. My heart was a drum, pounding out horror. I've driven fast before, Kansas City traffic, late for work. But this was life or death, and the forest wasn't letting us go. I swerved around a rut, praying the car held together. The trail was a nightmare, narrow and slick, the headlights barely cutting through the black. Livia screamed to go faster, but I was already pushing the Subaru too hard. Gideon muttered something about the tower's history, how it was cursed, but his voice cracked, useless. The hum shifted, sharper, like it was chasing us. Something hit the side of the car, a thud, heavy and wrong. I yelped, nearly losing the wheel. Livia looked back, whispering, "It's there." I didn't look. I couldn't. The scraping on the roof got louder, like claws digging in. This wasn't just scary, it was terror, raw and suffocating. I saw the main road ahead, a faint strip of pavement. Hope flickered, but the hum screamed, and the scraping turned to pounding, shaking the car. Gideon yelled to keep going, but Livia was hyperventilating, saying we wouldn't make it. I thought of a Kansas City bar story, a guy swearing he saw something in the woods that followed him home. I'd laughed then. Not now. The pounding stopped, but the hum didn't, and I felt eyes on us, heavy and hateful. I hit the pavement, tires screeching, and floored it, the forest blurring past. The Subaru groaned, but it held, carrying us away from that disturbing place. The road was smoother, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Livia was curled up, muttering about the shapes, how they moved. Gideon tried to calm her, but his voice was thin, like he didn't believe himself. The hum was fainter, but it lingered, like a stain. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting those things to slink out of the trees. The roof was quiet now, but I didn't trust it. I've driven bad roads, Ozark twists, icy highways, but this was different. Every mile felt like a trap, like we were still in their territory. The dashboard clock said 3 a.m. Dawn was close, but it didn't feel safe. Something scraped the undercarriage, a long, grinding screech. I cursed, slowing down, thinking I'd hit a rock. Gideon leaned forward, saying it was probably debris, but his eyes were wild. Livia whimpered, saying it wasn't a rock. I sped up again, ignoring the noise, but my gut twisted. The hum pulsed, matching the car's engine, like it was inside us now. I remembered a co-worker who camped here, came back rattled, saying the forest changed him. I got it now. This wasn't just a bad trip, it was horror, and it was personal. The road curved, and I prayed for a gas station, anything human. We hit a straight stretch, and I pushed the Subaru harder, the speedometer climbing. Livia was silent now, her sobs gone, which was worse. Gideon kept looking back, saying he didn't see anything, but his hands shook. The hum was barely audible, but the air felt heavy, like it was waiting. I saw lights far off, maybe a town, maybe Poplar Bluff. My chest loosened, just a bit. Then the scraping came again, sharp, from the trunk. My blood froze. It wasn't the roof now, it was inside the car. Livia screamed, and Gideon swung around. But the trunk was dark, packed with gear. Something was with us, and it wasn't hiding anymore. I didn't stop, didn't dare. The lights were closer, and I aimed for them, the Subaru shaking like it was falling apart. Gideon was yelling to pull over, check the trunk, but Livia begged me not to. I agreed with her, stopping was death. The scraping was rhythmic, like a heartbeat, and the hum was back, loud and cruel. I thought about my sketch pad, left in the tent, stupid but mine. It felt like we'd left more than gear behind, like we'd left pieces of ourselves. The road was empty, no other cars, just us and whatever was in the trunk. I kept driving, because stopping wasn't an option. The lights were a gas station, neon flickering in the dark. I pulled in, tires screeching, and parked under the brightest light. The hum stopped, and so did the scraping, but my hands were ice on the wheel. Livia was crying again, Gideon silent, staring at the trunk. I didn't want to look, but we had to. I grabbed a tire iron from the passenger seat, my only weapon, and we got out slow. The air was cold, too still, like the forest had followed us. I popped the trunk, hard in my throat, and shone my flashlight. Nothing, just bags, a cooler, my spare tire. But the cooler was scratched, deep gouges, like claws. My stomach dropped. We stood there, frozen, the gas station's hum mixing with the silence. Livia whispered that we'd escaped, but it didn't feel true. Gideon slammed the trunk, saying we needed to keep moving, get to a motel, anywhere. I nodded, but my legs were jelly. The clerk inside watched us, his face blank, like he'd seen this before. I bought gas, hands shaking, and we piled back in. The road stretched ahead, leading to safety, maybe. But the scratches on the cooler burned in my mind, and the air felt wrong, like we'd brought something with us. We drove on, but I knew it wasn't over. The Subaru hummed along the highway, Poplar Bluff fading behind us. Livia was quiet, staring out the window, her face hollow. Gideon was slumped in the back, clutching his dead flashlight like it'd save him. I kept driving, aiming for Columbia, their home, because it was closer than Kansas City. The horror clung to us, heavy and cold, like damp clothes. The scratches on the cooler haunted me. Too deep, too deliberate. I've had bad nights, like when my apartment flooded, but this was different. This was disturbing, like we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. The road was empty, dawn creeping up, but safety felt like a lie. We stopped at a diner an hour later, neon sign buzzing like a bad memory. The waitress, a tired woman with a smoker's cough, barely looked at us. I ordered coffee, but my hands shook too much to drink it. Gideon tried to joke, saying we'd have a story for years, but his eyes were red, scared. Livia didn't touch her food, just stared at her phone, no signal. I kept thinking about the trunk, how it felt alive. A guy at my office once said he felt watched after camping here. I'd rolled my eyes. Now I got it. The forest had marked us, and it wasn't done. The air in the diner felt wrong, too thick. Back in the car, Livia spoke, her voice small. I heard it breathing. We froze. She said it was in the trunk. Before we checked, a low, wet rasp. Gideon snapped that she was losing it, but his voice was shaky. I didn't say anything. My throat was too tight. I remembered the scratches, how they weren't random. We drove on. The Subaru's engine steady but loud, like it was hiding something. Livia kept checking the rear view, like she expected those things to appear. I did too. The highway was open, but it felt like a trap, like the forest was stretching its fingers after us. An hour from Columbia, the Subaru started jerking, the engine coughing. I cursed, pulling over. The hood was hot, and when I opened it, I saw nothing obvious, just wires, oil, and those scratches again, now on the battery. My heart sank. Gideon hovered, saying it was just a bad trip, but Livia stayed in the car, rocking slightly. I fixed flats, jump-started batteries, but this was different. The scratches were fresh, like they'd happened while we drove. A trucker passed, not stopping, and I felt exposed, like the world was watching. We were stranded, and that thing was close. I tried the engine again, and it sputtered to life, barely. We limped along, Livia muttering about the breathing, how it wasn't human. Gideon told her to stop, but I saw him glance at the trunk. My mistake was ignoring her, brushing it off as panic. I should have listened. The scratches, the hum, her words, it was all connected. We reached Columbia at noon, dropping Livia and Gideon at their place. Livia didn't say goodbye, just walked inside, blank. Gideon shook my hand, but his grip was weak. I drove to Kansas City, alone, the Subaru whining. I thought it was over, but I was wrong. Back home, I parked in my garage, too tired to unpack. That night, I heard it, a low rasp, like breathing, from the garage. My blood froze. I grabbed a flashlight, stupidly, and checked the Subaru. The trunk was closed, but the scratches on the cooler were deeper, like they'd grown. I opened it, heart pounding, and found my sketch pad, somehow there, pages torn, covered in jagged lines that weren't mine. The breathing was louder, coming from under the car. I backed away, locking the garage, but it followed, faint, through the walls. I called Livia the next day. No answer. Gideon texted, saying she'd gone back to the forest, alone, to face it. I drove to Columbia, desperate to stop her. Gideon met me, pale, saying she'd left at dawn. We called the police, who found her car by the tower, empty, her running shoes nearby, scratched like the cooler. They searched, but found nothing. Just the tower, silent, its base unmarked. Gideon broke down, blaming himself. I did too. My mistake was letting her go, not believing her about the breathing. It wasn't just in the forest, it was in us, in the car, in my garage. I sold the Subaru, moved apartments, but the breathing follows, faint, at night. Livia's gone, and whatever we brought back isn't. It's waiting, and I'm next. The police closed the case, calling it a missing person, but I know better. The tower's still out there, and those things, whatever they are, aren't bound to it. I keep my lights on now, check my locks twice. Gideon texts sometimes, but he's a shell, like me. We escaped, but at what cost? Livia's face haunts me, her words about the breathing echoing. I should have listened, should have stayed together. The horror wasn't just the forest, it was our choices, our mistakes. And now, every rasp I hear, every shadow I see, reminds me, it's not over. It never will be. I burned the sketch pad, but the lines are in my head, jagged, alive, like the things that took her. I don't camp anymore, don't drive at night. Kansas City feels small, like it's closing in. The breathing's quieter some nights, but it's there, waiting for me to slip. I wonder if Livia faced it, if she's still out there, part of it now. My mistake was thinking we could outrun it, that leaving the forest meant leaving the terror. It didn't. It followed us home, and it's patient. Too patient. I'm Calvin Dorsey, 27 years old, and I live in Springfield, Missouri. Last spring, I was itching to escape my dead-end retail job, so I planned a camping trip to Mark Twain National Forest, a couple hours east. I'd heard about an old lookout tower out there, abandoned for years, and it sounded like a cool spot to chill. I packed my old Ford Bronco with a tent, cooler, and my fishing rod, dreaming of quiet nights by a fire. My coworker, Sienna Tate, 24, and her brother, Reuben Tate, 30, both from Rolla, begged to come along. Sienna's a talker, always joking, while Reuben's a mechanic, gruff but handy. I wanted to go solo, but their vibe was good, so I said sure. We hit the road, laughing, radio cranked. The forest was thick, all pines and shadows, the kind of place that feels ancient. We parked the Bronco at a dirt pull-off near the trail to the tower, late afternoon sun barely breaking through. I got a weird vibe, like the air was too still, but I shook it off. Sienna was snapping selfies, calling the woods insta-gold, while Ruben hauled gear, grumbling about the hike. The tower was a mile in, a rusted hulk stabbing the sky. It looked beat up, vines crawling over its legs, ladder half broken. I figured we'd camp in the clearing below, safer than climbing that death trap. But something about it felt off, like it was staring. The hike was rough, the trail all roots and rocks. Sienna kept tripping, laughing it off, while Ruben plowed ahead, carrying most of the gear. I fished my rod from the bag, hoping for a stream nearby, but the forest was dry, no water in sight. The tower loomed as we got closer, its metal frame creaking in the breeze. I noticed the quiet. No birds, no bugs, just our steps. I've camped before, Ozarks mostly, and it's never this dead. Sienna said it was spooky, but her grin was forced. Ruben just shrugged, but I saw him glance back, like he felt it too. My gut said something was wrong, but I ignored it. Setting up camp was chaos. Sienna dropped a tent pole, cracking it, and I burned my hand on the fire starter. Ruben, the pro, had his tent up fast but griped about the ground being too hard. By dusk, we had a shaky setup, 2 tents, a fire pit, and the cooler. The tower's shadow stretched over us, long and dark, like it owned the place. I tried fishing talk to lighten the mood, asking Ruben about streams, but he was distracted, eyeing the trees. Sienna roasted marshmallows, burning half, her chatter fading. The silence was heavy, horror movie heavy, and I didn't like it one bit. We ate hot dogs by the fire, the flames spitting in the dark. Sienna tried to keep it fun, telling a story about a bad date in Rolla, but her voice was tight. Ruben barely spoke, poking the fire, his eyes darting to the tower. I mentioned a fishing trip where I caught nothing but a boot, hoping for a laugh, but it fell flat. The tower felt closer, though it hadn't moved. I've had creepy nights, closing the store alone, hearing noises, but this was different. It was disturbing, like the forest was holding a secret. I kept my fishing rod close, like it was a weapon, which was dumb but comforting. Night hit hard, the temperature dropping fast. We huddled by the fire, Sienna wrapped in a blanket, Ruben sharpening a stick with his pocket knife. I suggested ghost stories, but Sienna said, "This place is creepy enough." She wasn't wrong. The tower was a black shape against the stars, and I swore I saw something flicker at its base, like a spark. Ruben saw it too, his knife pausing. "Probably nothing," he muttered, but his grip tightened. I thought about a Springfield news story, a hiker lost out here, never found. It stuck with me, nagging, like a warning I didn't heed. The fire crackled, but it was dying, and I didn't want to fetch more wood. Sienna kept checking her phone, no bars, muttering about bad planning. Ruben stood, saying he'd grab logs, but I stopped him. Going into the dark felt stupid. He sat back down, annoyed, but I saw relief in his eyes. The flicker at the tower came again, steadier, like a signal. My stomach twisted. I've seen weird stuff, late-night shadows in parking lots, but this was horror-level wrong. We all stared, waiting for it to stop. It didn't. The air got colder, and I felt watched, like something was sizing us up. Sienna whispered, "What is that?" her voice small. Ruben didn't answer, just carved harder into his stick. I grabbed my flashlight, shining it at the tower, but the beam barely reached, and the flicker didn't flinch. It was low, near the ground, pulsing slow, like it was alive. My hands were sweaty, the fishing rod useless now. I suggested moving to the Bronco, just to sit tight, but Ruben said it was too far in the dark. Sienna nodded, her eyes wide. The flicker grew brighter, and I heard a sound. A low, wet click, like teeth snapping. It was close, too close. We didn't move, didn't speak, just watched the tower. The clicking came again, from the trees, not the tower, circling us. My heart was racing, and I gripped the flashlight tighter. Sienna's blanket slipped, her hands shaking. Ruben's knife was still, his eyes locked on the dark. The hum started then, faint but growing, like a machine waking up. It wasn't the tower, it was the forest, the air, everything. I thought about bolting, but my legs felt like lead. The clicking stopped, but the hum didn't, and the flicker was a steady glow now, calling us. Something was out there, and it wasn't friendly. That clicking sound was like nails on a chalkboard, circling us, and the glowing light at the tower's base pulsed brighter, like it was mocking us. Sienna's face was pale, her blanket clutched tight, while Ruben gripped his knife, eyes darting. I whispered to stay put. Running into the dark was a horror movie mistake. My flashlight shook in my hand, the beam weak against the glow. Ruben suggested checking the Bronco, saying we could sleep there, but Sienna hissed it was too far. She was right. The trail was a trap in this dark. The hum grew louder, buzzing in my chest, and I felt sick, like the forest was closing in. We needed a plan, but fear was calling the shots. Sienna wanted to pack up and bolt, saying the clicking was bad news. Ruben argued we should wait for light, his voice gruff but shaky. I was torn. Staying felt like waiting to die, but moving was worse. The glow flared, and the clicking stopped, which was somehow scarier. I've had bad nights in Springfield, like when the store got robbed, but this was disturbing, like the air itself hated us. Ruben stood, saying he'd scout the trail, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't be stupid," I snapped. He glared but sat, and I saw his hand tremble. The hum shifted, almost laughing, and I knew we were in over our heads. We tried to keep the fire going, but it was dying fast, like something was stealing its heat. Sienna tossed on the last logs, her hands shaking. "This is wrong," she whispered, and I nodded, my throat tight. Ruben carved his stick harder, splinters flying, like it'd protect us. The glow was steady now, and I swore I saw shapes in it. Low, hunched, moving slow. My stomach twisted. I thought about a fishing trip where I got lost, felt watched, but this was horror-level worse. The hum was in my teeth, and the air stank, like damp rot and copper. Whatever was out there wasn't just curious, it was hunting. Sienna's phone slipped from her hand, hitting the dirt with a thud. She scrambled for it, cursing, and the screen lit up, showing a photo she'd taken of the tower earlier. I froze. In the background, near the ladder, was a shape, blurry, but tall, with arms too long. "That wasn't there," she whispered, voice breaking. Ruben leaned in, his knife pausing, and his face went gray. I wanted to say it was a trick of light, but I couldn't lie. The hum spiked, like it knew we'd seen it. Sienna shoved the phone in her pocket, saying we had to leave, now. My heart said yes, but my legs said no. Ruben suggested burning the cooler to keep the fire alive, saying light might scare it off. It was a desperate idea, but we were desperate. I dragged the cooler over, my fishing rod clattering, and we tossed in napkins, paper plates, anything that'd burn. The flames jumped, but the glow from the tower didn't flinch, and the hum got louder, mocking us. Sienna kept glancing at her phone, like that photo was proof we were screwed. I remembered a Springfield rumor about this forest, people seeing lights, never coming back. I'd laughed it off. Not now. The shapes in the glow moved closer, and my skin crawled. We were running out of time. We argued, voices low but sharp. Sienna wanted to run, saying the Bronco was our shot. Ruben said we'd die on the trail, his knife flashing in the firelight. I suggested hiding in the tents, but it sounded dumb even to me. The hum was relentless, and the glow was blinding, casting shadows that didn't match our shapes. Something clicked again, closer, behind the tents. Sienna yelped, and Ruben swung his knife, slicing air. My flashlight caught a glimpse, something low, scuttling, gone in a blink. My mouth went dry. This wasn't a bear or a coyote. This was wrong, horror movie wrong. We backed toward the fire, shoulder to shoulder, like that'd save us. Sienna was shaking, saying we should have stayed home. Ruben muttered about checking the tower, thinking the glow might be a machine. I snapped that was suicide. The shapes were there, waiting. The hum changed, almost words, but twisted, like a radio tuned to hell. I gripped my flashlight, wishing it was a gun. The clicking came again, from all sides now, like we were surrounded. Sienna's phone buzzed, impossible with no signal, and she dropped it, screaming. The screen showed that photo again, but the shape was clearer, closer, like it had moved. I grabbed the phone, shoving it in my pocket, and told them to stick together. We couldn't stay, couldn't fight. The Bronco was our only hope, but the trail was a gauntlet. Ruben nodded, his knife ready, while Sienna clung to her blanket, eyes wet. The glow pulsed faster, and the shapes were at the clearing's edge, hunched and still, like they were waiting for us to run. The hum was deafening, vibrating my bones. I thought about my job, how boring it seemed now, how safe. We took a step toward the trail, and the clicking exploded, loud and fast, like a warning. We froze, hearts pounding, knowing we'd made a mistake. The fire sputtered, nearly out, and the glow from the tower was all we had, bathing us in sick light. Sienna whispered my name, her voice tiny, and pointed. One of the shapes moved, slow, toward us, its limbs bending wrong, like a puppet with cut strings. Reuben raised his knife, but his arm shook. I clutched the flashlight, its beam useless now. The hum was a scream, and the clicking was everywhere, closing in. We'd waited too long, argued too much. The shapes were closer, their outlines sharp in the glow, and I knew we weren't alone anymore. They were here, and they were hungry. The hum was a living thing, clawing inside my skull, and that glowing light at the tower's base pulsed like a sick heart. Sienna was trembling, her blanket a useless shield, while Reuben's knife glinted, his eyes wild. The clicking was everywhere, snapping like bones, and I saw it. A shape, low and twisted, scuttling at the clearing's edge. My heart slammed, horror choking me. This wasn't a prank or a bad trip. This was real, and it was bad. I whispered to stay tight, but Sienna's breath was ragged, and Reuben was frozen, knife raised. The shape moved closer, joined by another, their outlines wrong, like shadows stretched too far. The hum screamed, and I knew we were in deep. I gripped my flashlight, its beam shaking, useless against the glow. Sienna whimpered, saying we should have left, and I felt the guilt. She was right. Reuben hissed to shut up, but his voice cracked, fear leaking through. The shapes stopped, just outside the fire's light, and I saw them clearer, hunched, with limbs that didn't bend right, like bugs pretending to be human. My stomach lurched. I've had scary moments in Springfield, like a near-miss car crash, but this was disturbing, like the forest was alive and hated us. The clicking slowed, deliberate, and the hum pulsed, almost words, twisting my gut. Sienna grabbed my arm, nails biting. "They're watching," she whispered, and I nodded, too scared to speak. Reuben swung his knife, muttering about fighting, but it was bravado. His hands shook. The glow flared, blinding, and one shape lunged, fast, stopping just short of the fire. I saw its face, no eyes, just a jagged slit, moving like it was breathing. My scream stuck, and Sienna stifled hers, tears streaming. The hum was deafening, vibrating the ground. I thought about a coworker who camped here, came back quiet, saying the woods took something. I got it now. This was terror, and it was personal. We backed up, tripping over the cooler, the fire spitting as it died. The shapes circled, more now, 5, maybe 6, clicking in sync with the hum. I yelled to stick together, but my voice was thin. Reuben swung his knife again, slicing nothing, and Sienna clung to me, her blanket dragging. The glow was inside my head, like it was pulling me toward the tower. I remembered a Springfield ghost story about lights luring hikers to their deaths. It felt real now, horror seeping into my bones. The shapes didn't attack, just watched, like they were waiting for us to break. I fumbled Sienna's phone from my pocket, the photo of that shape still there, clearer now, its slit mouth grinning. I dropped it, heart pounding, and Reuben cursed, saying we had to run. Sienna shook her head, sobbing, "They'll get us." She was right. The trail was a death trap, but staying was worse. The hum changed, mocking, and the shapes moved closer, their clicks like laughter. My fishing rod was by the tent, useless, but I grabbed it, needing something in my hands. The glow pulsed faster, and I felt it, a pull, like the tower wanted us. We were trapped, and they knew it. Reuben shouted to make a break for the Bronco, his knife flashing. I nodded, no better ideas, but Sienna was frozen, eyes locked on a shape that was too close, its slit twitching. I yanked her up, hissing, "Move." We stumbled toward the trail, the clicking exploding behind us. My flashlight caught glimpses, limbs, slits, no eyes, chasing us. The hum was a roar, shaking the trees, and the glow followed, lighting our path like a cruel joke. Sienna tripped, and I pulled her along, my lungs burning. Reuben was ahead, shouting, but the shapes were fast, too fast, and they weren't stopping. The trail was a mess, roots snagging our feet. Sienna was crying, saying she couldn't keep up, but I wouldn't let go. Reuben swung his knife back, like it'd do anything, but his face was all fear. The glow was right behind us, and the clicking was in my head, matching my pulse. I thought about my job, how I'd give anything to be there now, safe. Something grabbed my sleeve, cold and sharp, and I screamed, shaking it off. The Bronco was close, its outline in the dark, but the shapes were closer, their slits hissing now, like they were tasting the air. This wasn't just scary, it was life or death. We reached the clearing, the Bronco glinting under moonlight. I fumbled the keys, dropping them in the dirt. Shit! I scrambled, grabbing them, while Sienna leaned on me, gasping. Ruben was at the car, yanking the door, yelling to hurry. The shapes stopped at the trail's edge, watching, their slits glowing in the tower's light. The hum was a blade, cutting my thoughts. I unlocked the Bronco, shoving Sienna in, Ruben diving to the back. The engine roared, but the clicking was on us, and something slammed the roof, hard. My heart stopped. They were here, and we weren't out yet. I floored it, tires spitting dirt, the Bronco lurching forward. The glow stayed with us, lighting the trail, and the clicking was everywhere, like a swarm. Sienna was screaming, Ruben cursing, his knife useless now. Something scraped the side, a long, screeching claw, and I swerved, nearly hitting a tree. The hum was inside the car, vibrating the seats, my bones. I saw one shape in the rear view, loping after us. It slit wide, like a smile. My hands shook, but I kept driving, the trail a blur. The Bronco was our lifeline, but the shapes were relentless, and I knew we'd made a mistake running. They wanted us to. The Bronco's engine roared, tires chewing dirt as I floored it down the trail. The hum was a scream, shaking my bones, and the glow from the tower chased us, lighting the trees like a sick spotlight. Sienna was sobbing in the passenger seat, Ruben yelling from the back, his knife useless. Something slammed the roof again, claws scraping metal, and my heart was in my throat. This was horror, pure and raw, not some campfire tale. I swerved around a root, the Bronco tilting, and checked the rear view. Those shapes were there, loping after us, their slit mouths wide. I've driven fast in Springfield storms, but this was life or death, and the forest was fighting us every inch. The trail was a gauntlet, branches ripping at the windows like hands. Sienna screamed to go faster, but the Bronco was maxed out, shaking like it'd break. Ruben leaned forward, shouting about the glow, how it wasn't fading. The hum pulsed, matching the scrapes on the roof, and I felt it. Something heavy up there, moving. My stomach twisted. I remembered a Springfield bar story, a guy saying he saw things in these woods that followed him. I'd laughed. Not now. Another shape darted beside us, its limbs a blur, and I yanked the wheel, nearly rolling us. The glow was blinding, and we weren't outrunning it. The main road was close, a faint strip of gravel in the dark. I pushed harder, the Bronco groaning, but the scraping got louder, like claws digging into the roof. Sienna was hyperventilating, saying we were gonna die, and Ruben snapped at her to shut up, his voice raw. The hum was everywhere, vibrating the air, my teeth. Something hit the side, a sickening thud, and the Bronco swerved. I corrected, barely, my hands slick with sweat. I've had close calls, near misses on highways, but this was terror, like the forest itself was alive and hungry. The shapes were still behind us, relentless, their slits glowing in the light. We hit the gravel road, tires screeching, and I didn't slow down. The glow was fainter, but the hum didn't stop, and the roof was still scraping, slower now, like whatever was up there was waiting. Ruben was muttering, saying we'd made it, but Sienna shook her head, tears streaming. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting those things to burst from the trees. The Bronco's engine whined, pushed too hard, but I couldn't ease up. The clicking was back, faint but close, like it was inside the car. My skin crawled. This wasn't just scary, it was disturbing, like we'd woken something that wouldn't sleep again. Something shifted in the back, a low thud from the cargo area. Sienna screamed, and Ruben swung around, knife raised. But it was just our gear, right? I didn't look, couldn't. The hum spiked, angry, and the scraping on the roof turned to pounding, heavy and deliberate. I thought about my fishing rod, left behind, stupid but mine, like we'd left pieces of ourselves in that clearing. The road stretched on, empty, no cars, no lights. I aimed for Rolla, their home, because it was closer than Springfield. The pounding stopped, but the clicking didn't, and I felt eyes on us, cold and hateful, from inside the Bronco. The Bronco lurched, a tire blowing out, and I cursed, wrestling the wheel. We skidded, gravel flying, and I slowed, heart pounding. Ruben yelled to keep going, but Sienna was silent, staring at the floor. I limped the car forward, the rim grinding, praying we'd make it. The hum was softer, but the clicking was louder, coming from the back. I glanced in the rear view, and my blood froze. A shape, low and hunched, in the cargo area, its slit mouth twitching. Ruben saw it too, his knife dropping, and Sienna screamed, long and raw. I floored it, the Bronco shaking, but that thing was with us, inside, and it wasn't hiding anymore. A gas station's lights flickered ahead, neon cutting the dark. I pulled in, tires screeching, and slammed the brakes. The clicking stopped, but the hum lingered, faint, like a taunt. Ruben was shaking, saying we had to check the back, but Sienna begged him not to. I grabbed a tire iron from under my seat, hands trembling, and we got out slow. The air was heavy, like the forest had followed us. I opened the cargo door, tire iron raised, and shone my flashlight. Nothing, just bags, the cooler, my spare tire. But the cooler was torn, claw marks deep and fresh. My knees buckled. We'd escaped the forest, but not the horror. We stood by the Bronco, frozen, the gas station's hum mixing with the silence. Sienna was crying, saying it was still here, and Ruben nodded, pale, his bravado gone. The clerk, an old guy with a lazy eye, watched us from inside, like he'd seen this before. I bought gas, hands shaking, and we piled back in, locking the doors. The road to Rolla was open, but my gut said we weren't safe. The claw marks burned in my mind, and the air felt wrong, like we'd brought something with us. I drove on, faster than I should have, because stopping meant facing whatever was still in the back. The Bronco's rim screeched, but I didn't stop, not yet. Sienna was quiet, staring out, her blanket gone. Ruben kept looking back, saying he didn't see it, but his voice was hollow. The hum was gone, but the silence was worse, like a predator waiting. I thought about home, my boring job, how it felt like another life. The shapes, the slits, the clicking, they weren't just in the forest. They'd marked us, followed us. Rolla was close, maybe 20 miles, but every mile felt like a test. Something scraped the cargo area again, faint but there, and I knew we hadn't escaped. We'd just delayed the inevitable. We reached Rolla at dawn, the Bronco limping on its ruined rim. Sienna and Ruben's place was a small duplex, gray and quiet. I parked, hands shaking, the horror still clinging like damp rot. Sienna didn't speak, just stared at her hands, while Ruben grabbed his knife, like it'd help now. I wanted to say something, make it okay, but my throat was tight. The claw marks on the cooler haunted me, proof we brought something back. I've had bad days in Springfield, long shifts, angry customers, but this was different. This was disturbing, like the world had shifted, and we were stuck in its shadow. The air was too still, like it was waiting. We went inside, locking the door, but it didn't feel safe. Ruben checked the windows, muttering about securing the place, while Sienna curled up on the couch, blank. I kept the tire iron close, stupid but grounding. The clicking was gone, but I heard it in my head, that wet snap of teeth. I thought about calling someone, cops my boss, but what would I say? Monsters chased us. I remembered a Springfield co-worker who quit after a camping trip, saying the woods kept something. I got it now. The horror wasn't just the tower, it was us, what we'd seen, what we'd carried. Sienna broke the silence, her voice small. It's in the car. Ruben snapped that we'd checked, but she shook her head, eyes wide. I heard it under the seats. My stomach dropped. I'd ignored the scraping, called it gear shifting, but her words hit hard. We went outside, slow, the morning light cold and gray. The Bronco sat there, normal but wrong, like it was watching. I opened the driver's door, tire iron raised, and checked under the seats. Nothing, but the air stank, like rot and metal, and the claw marks on the cooler were deeper, like they'd grown. My hands shook. We'd made a mistake, thinking we were free. Ruben suggested torching the Bronco, half serious, but Sienna said no, it was our only way out. I agreed, but my gut screamed to run. We went back inside, planning to call a mechanic, get the tire fixed, and leave Rolla. The phone lines were down, though, which felt too convenient. Sienna kept checking her phone, the photo of that shape gone, like it had erased itself. Ruben paced, knife in hand, saying we should have fought. I wanted to scream, "Fight what?" Those things weren't human. The air grew heavier, and I heard it, a faint click from the duplex vents. My blood froze. It wasn't in the car. It was here. By noon, the clicking was louder, coming from the walls, like it was circling. Sienna was crying, saying we shouldn't have come back together, that it followed us. Ruben yelled at her to stop, but his eyes were wild, scared. I gripped the tire iron, checking the vents, but saw nothing. The stink was stronger, choking, like the forest had moved in. I thought about my mistake, not believing Sienna, not checking the Bronco better. A Springfield urban legend said the forest took people, left pieces behind. I felt it now, pieces of us gone, replaced with fear. The clicking stopped, and the silence was worse, like a predator cocking its head. We decided to leave, drive to Springfield, flat rim or not. We grabbed what we could, keys, wallets, Ruben's knife, and ran to the Bronco. The engine started, barely, but the clicking was back, loud, from the cargo area. Sienna screamed, and Ruben swung open the back, knife ready. Nothing, just the torn cooler, its marks bleeding sap, like it was alive. I floored it, the Bronco lurching, and we hit the highway, Rala shrinking. The clicking followed, faint, under the seats again. Sienna was right. It was with us, hiding, waiting. We'd brought it home, and it wasn't leaving. An hour out, the Bronco died, engine choking, smoke pouring. We coasted to the shoulder, stranded. Ruben kicked the door, cursing, while Sienna sat on the ground, blank. I called a tow, but the signal cut out, like the forest was laughing. The clicking was constant now, circling the car, and I saw it, a shape, low and hunched, in the trees across the road. Its slit mouth twitched, glowing faintly. My heart stopped. Ruben saw it too, his knife falling, and Sienna just stared, like she'd given up. My mistake was thinking we could escape, that running was enough. It wasn't. The shape moved closer, and the hum was back, soft but final. The tow never came. By night, the clicking was inside the Bronco, under us, in us. Ruben tried to fight, swinging his knife, but he screamed, blood spraying, and went still. Sienna didn't move, just whispered, "It's here," before her eyes went empty. I ran, leaving them, the tire iron useless, the hum chasing me. I hitched a ride to Springfield, but the clicking followed, in my apartment, my dreams. The police found the Bronco, empty, claw marks everywhere, Ruben and Sienna gone. They called it a bear attack, but I know better. The tower took them, and it's waiting for me. Every click I hear, every shadow. Is it patient, hungry? I don't sleep much now. Springfield feels small, closing in. I quit my job, sold the Broncos title, but the clicking's in my walls, my head. I see their faces, Sienna's tears, Ruben's fear, and know I failed them. My mistake was running, leaving them to die. The forest didn't just take them, it took me, piece by piece. I keep a light on, check the vents, but it's there, waiting. The hum's faint, but growing, and the shapes are closer, their slits watching. I'm not safe, never will be. The horror's not the tower. It's what I brought back, and it's coming for what's left.